Chapter 731. Seeing this, the humble prince, old man Xiao, and all the other officials felt relieved. The unexpected disaster had ended in an inexplicable way as if they were in a dream. The humble prince cupped his hands toward the sky and said politely, "May I know your name, senior? Today you saved the Thunderflame dynasty from disaster. We will definitely repay your kindness." There were only 7 people in the mystic comprehending realm in the world. However, there was one more out of nowhere. The humble prince wanted to know who this person was. If the humble prince guessed correctly, this person might have killed Li Jueqing and Crown Prince Lei Haoge. There was no comparison between saving the Thunderflame dynasty and killing the 2 people. However, the humble prince was curious as to why a mystic comprehending realm cultivator would kill Li Jueqing and Lei Haoge. The voice came from the sky, "Everything is caused by karma. I'm just following the path of karma." In the end, the voice gradually disappeared as if it had gone far away. "Karma, it's karma again. Old man Xiao, what's the karma he's talking about?" The humble prince was confused. Old man Xiao looked at the sky as if he wanted to see through the world. He said faintly, "I'm not sure about the path of karma. It involves the origin of heaven and earth. What this person is looking for is much more profound than what I'm looking for. If I'm not mistaken, Li Jueqing and Lei Haoge were killed by this person. Those 2 people might be affected by some karma." Even old man Xiao could not explain it clearly. The humble prince was even more confused. Fortunately, the result was good. The situation just now was truly a matter of life and death, and the Thunderfire royal dynasty would have been consigned to eternal damnation. Fortunately, Leng Shiqi had stepped out and delayed for a few breaths of time. Afterward, that mysterious expert had appeared and intimidated the other experts. Only then was the Thunderfire Heaven Punishing Formation ready, and they had finally forced 6 Direction Spirit Supremacy to retreat. At the thought of this, the humble prince turned to look at Leng Shiqi. He did not hide the admiration and satisfaction in his eyes. Leng Shiqi, who was in the unity of heaven and man realm, dared to face so many heavenly origin realm masters and 6 Direction Spiritual Sovereign, who was in the mystic comprehending realm. Not only did he show his fearless courage, but he also showed his absolute loyalty to the Thunderflame dynasty. If he didn't nurture such a talent and put him in an important position, he would be blind. The undemocratic king raised his voice and said, "Continue to activate the heaven-destroying Thunderfire formation to prevent Lord 6 Directions from attacking us. The rest of you return to the main hall for a discussion." Bus. A gigantic formation with a radius of 100 miles appeared. Instantly, red and purple colors filled the sky, enveloping the entire inner city of the imperial capital. This was the supreme formation that the Thunderflame dynasty was proud of, the Thunderflame Heaven Annihilating Formation. If the array was fully activated, it would be able to summon lightning and fire. Even a Sky Origin Stage cultivator would not be able to withstand it for long. Seeing that the Thunderfire Heaven Punishing Array was finally activated, the people in the hall who were still in shock finally calmed down. Especially those civil officials who had no cultivation base. They almost suffocated under the spiritual pressure of so many Sky Origin Stage cultivators. If not for Empyrean Black Flame protecting them, these people would probably have long perished. The undemocratic king knew how dangerous the process was. He first comforted the people and said, "Those top sects actually joined hands to attack the imperial palace. No one expected that. Fortunately, the crisis is over. You can rest assured now. Moreover, the imperial capital has the protection of so many powerful cultivators from the imperial hall of worship and loyal officials like Lu Xingji. Just like what the mysterious ethereal stage cultivator said, the Thunderflame dynasty is very lucky." Speaking of this, he looked at Leng Shiqi and said, "Lu Xingji, when Lord 6 Directions forced me to hand over the Dark Thunder Guards and the higher-ups of the Discipline Commission, I did hesitate. However, your appearance made me determined to fight to the death with them. Even if I die, I will protect everyone's lives." Looking at the undemocratic king's excited expression, Leng Shiqi immediately said with a strong sense of righteousness, "I will pledge my loyalty to the Thunderflame dynasty. I will pledge my loyalty to the Thunderflame dynasty." The other civil and military officials were all very excited. After going through such a great disaster, it was rare for them to be united. Lu Xingji, the late emperor, made an exception and chose you as the chief steward of the Dark Thunder Guards. You've made a great contribution this time. I won't mistreat you. The undemocratic king was full of praise for Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi, on the other hand, was secretly laughing. In fact, he did not do anything. All he did was to say a few nice words. He did not make any great contribution. However, what he did showed the undemocratic king his loyalty. That was why the undemocratic king decided to put him in an important position. Of course, if it was someone else who rushed up like this, they might have been killed by Lord Six Directions with a slap. Leng Shiqi dared to rush up because he had his own trump card. His trump card was the mysterious ethereal stage cultivator. Leng Shiqi was not good at foresight. It was impossible for him to know that a ethereal stage cultivator was nearby and would help him. In fact, the so-called ethereal stage cultivator was actually Leng Shiqi himself. To be more precise, it was his soul double. Not long ago, when the Ink Frost Ghoul and Leng Shiqi were communicating through telepathy, he guessed that the Ink Frost Ghoul would secretly save him after he stepped up. That was how he would be treated now. However, Leng Shiqi would not hand his life over to the Ink Frost Ghoul. What if the Ink Frost Ghoul failed to save him? Therefore, an extremely crazy idea flashed through his mind. He immediately exchanged for a magical item from the system store. It was the soul double. The soul double was actually a duplicate of Leng Shiqi's soul. It was equivalent to having two souls, each of which was himself. The mysterious ethereal stage cultivator was actually Leng Shiqi in disguise. He had formed a godly soul when he broke through to the unity of heaven and man realm. Even without a physical body, he could survive in the outside world for a long time. He secretly released his soul double and used the law of earth to cover his aura. Then he used the law of gravity to intimidate the elites. That was how he was mistaken for an ethereal stage cultivator. The moment Leng Shiqi's soul double appeared, forcing the ethereal stage cultivators to fall to the ground was already the limit of what he could do. It seemed like a great deterrent, but in fact, it did not cause any harm to the elites. It was just that the ethereal stage cultivators subconsciously thought that it was a ethereal stage cultivator who attacked, so they were mentally defeated. Leng Shiqi's actions were naturally risky. If Six Direction Spirit Sovereign attacked him directly, he would be exposed. Therefore he did not attack again after that. He even used the word karma to show that he was unfathomable so that others would not dare to test him. As long as he could delay until the heaven-destroying Thunderfire formation was activated, he would succeed. Fortunately, everything was going according to his plan, and the result was the best. Now, not only was Leng Shiqi placed in an important position, but he was also blamed for killing Li Jueqing and Lei Haoge. Therefore he no longer had any worries. To be able to toy with two ethereal stage cultivators and dozens of ethereal stage cultivators in the palm of his hand, Leng Shiqi was bold and crazy enough to do it. Of course, all of this was based on the premise that he had comprehended the law of nature in advance. Otherwise, even if he had the system, it would be useless no matter how bold he was. The humble prince pondered for a moment, then said, "Lu Xingji, you have not been one of the four chiefs for long, so you must not be in charge of many provinces. From now on, the 9 eastern counties of the Thunderfire dynasty are under your supervision, and I grant you the power of acting Grand Commander." Chapter 732. The Emperor gave Leng Shiqi 2 rewards. The first was the right to supervise the 9 counties in the east of the Thunderblaze dynasty. In fact, this was the right that Leng Shiqi should have, but it was divided by the other 3 Grand Managers. The others didn't think much of it, but Grand Manager Hai and Grand Manager Shinta didn't have it easy. Before coming to the palace, they had each given Leng Shiqi a county. It was like cutting a piece of meat. Now they were going to spit out what they had swallowed earlier. As for the second reward, everyone was shocked. What did it mean to be the acting chief commander? Apparently, Lord Botched Governance was going to let Leng Shiqi be the chief commander of the Dark Thunder Guards. When Leng Shiqi's strength and experience were enough, Heavenly Venerable He Yen would probably give up his position. However, judging from Leng Shiqi's performance today, he did have the potential to become the Grand Commander, so no one said anything. "Thank you, Your Highness," Leng Shiqi said politely. "You deserve it." The Emperor smiled, but his muscles were stiff when he smiled. He probably hadn't smiled for a long time. He continued, "Although we survived a crisis today, we also found many loopholes in the imperial capital's defense. We also know that the sects in the world are so powerful." The Emperor's tone became more and more serious. This time, the sects gathered more than 30 Sky Origin Realm cultivators, but they didn't send all of their experts. For example, the mysterious 10,000 Laws sect had 9 Sky Origin Realm cultivators, the Blood-Robed Pavilion had 5, and the 6 Unity Spiritual Region had even more. If all the Sky Origin Realm cultivators from these top sects came, even the Thunderblaze Heaven Slaying Array would be useless. Old Man Xiao also said, "There are so many top sects in the various counties of the dynasty. How did they team up within a year? Don't forget that there are great grudges between some of these sections. It's unbelievable for them to team up. Old man Xiao, you're saying that there's something behind their teamwork? The emperor was enlightened. That's right. So, the Thunderflame dynasty has to be vigilant. Emperor Zhuozhen's eyes flashed and he immediately ordered, call back all the Sky Origin Stage powerhouses outside. From now on, the heaven-destroying Thunderfire formation must be maintained by 4 Sky Origin Stage powerhouses at all times. We can't let anyone sneak into the royal capital. Also, the restrictions on the Heavenly Thunderfire bead need to be changed as well. Otherwise, the Heavenly Thunderfire Annihilation formation will take too long to activate. This formation hasn't been used for over 1,000 years, so it can't be activated like today. Everyone deeply agreed with this point. If the Thunderfire Heaven Punishing Array could be directly activated today, how could there be so many problems? Lastly, there is one more if, and that is to establish the Crown Prince. This matter could not wait any longer. There were many ordinary people in the huge Thunderblaze dynasty, and they were also the foundation of the dynasty. If no one ascends the throne, I'm afraid that the people's hearts won't be stable. Speaking of this, the humble prince glanced at the crowd. However, the problem was back to the original one. No one was suitable for the throne. Even if he wanted a puppet emperor, he had to at least look like one. At this moment, Leng Shiqi stepped forward and said, Your Highness, I have a candidate in mind. Let's hear it. Emperor Zhuozhen smiled when he saw someone speak, and it was Leng Shiqi. I think there is a prince who can succeed the throne. This person is the eldest son of the late emperor, and he has countless outstanding military achievements. He is also in the unity of heaven and man realm. He is the eldest prince, Lei Haoyan. Leng Shiqi spoke out the candidate in his mind. When Lei Haoyan was mentioned, Emperor Zhuozhen frowned. A year ago, when Lei Qingjun passed away, Lei Haoyan had rashly broken into the palace. At that time, Emperor Zhuozhen personally removed Lei Haoyan's status as a prince and imprisoned him for life. However, now that Leng Shiqi recommended Lei Haoyan to succeed the throne, Emperor Zhuozhen was not happy about it. However, he still asked patiently, since Lord Lu recommended Lei Haoyan, you must have your own reasons. Your Highness, I know that Lei Haoyan is a bit impulsive, but he has something that all the other princes don't have. It is something that an emperor needs, Leng Shiqi explained. Oh, what is it? Emperor Zhuozhen was not the only one who was curious. It is foresight. Leng Shiqi said seriously, Your Highness and everyone else should still remember what Lei Haoyan said when he broke into the palace a year ago. Now that he mentioned it, everyone finally remembered that Lei Haoyan said that the Thunderflame dynasty was too aggressive towards the spirit cultivator sections. What the late emperor did before his death not only did not scare off the spirit cultivator sects, but it also aroused their hatred and anger, and even threatened the rise and fall of the Thunderflame dynasty. At that time, everyone present felt that Lei Haoyan was worrying for nothing, and they also felt that he was too young. However, wasn't everything that had happened today exactly as Lei Haoyan had predicted? It was just that Lei Haoyan did not expect the spirit cultivator sects to counterattack so quickly. It seemed that Lei Haoyan's unique foresight was indeed amazing. Just from this point alone, he did have the potential to be an emperor. But then again, Lei Haoyan was originally the candidate that everyone liked. Unfortunately, with the late emperor's will, who could make an exception and make Lei Haoyan the crown prince? Therefore, Emperor Zhuozhen fell into silence. He also knew that Leng Shiqi was right. Lei Haoyan's foresight could be said to be further than everyone else. However, rules were rules and they could not be easily broken. Leng Shiqi continued, Your Highness, I know that the late emperor stripped Lei Haoyan of his right to succeed the throne when he was still on the throne. However, if Lei Haoyan was already the emperor of the Thunderflame dynasty, he would definitely have taken precautions against the revenge and attacks of the spirit cultivator sections. Even if what happened today happened again, he would not have let us be in such a sorry state and let a Tongshan realm expert change our fate. I think that such an emperor is enough to break some of the so-called rules. Your Highness should know best which is more important. After a while, Emperor Zhuozhen nodded deeply and said, You are right. Lei Haoyan's foresight alone is worthy of the throne. I think that my brother's spirit in heaven will not blame me. After all, whether the Thunderflame dynasty has a good emperor or not is very important. The other officials looked at each other. They could see that Emperor Zhuozhen had made up his mind. They immediately shouted together, Your Highness is wise. It is really the fortune of the Thunderflame dynasty. Emperor Zhuozhen did not care about the flattery of everyone. He said to Leng Shiqi, This matter is settled. Lei Haoyan was recommended by you, so you will go and announce the decree on behalf of me. Your Highness, Leng Shiqi laughed in his heart. He had finally waited for this opportunity. A great opportunity was right in front of him. Chapter 733. The humble king asked Leng Shiqi to deliver the imperial edict, which was a great favor to Lei Haoyan. After all, Lei Haoyan was still under house arrest. Lei Haoyan would definitely remember who saved him and gave him the throne. If the future emperor remembered the favor, then it would be a big deal. Prince Ying's palace was the residence of the eldest prince, Lei Haoyan. However, Lei Haoyan was stripped of his position as Prince Ying after he came out of Skyscar. A year ago he was even stripped of his status as a prince. From then on he would be alone for the rest of his life. Prince Ying's palace used to be luxurious and majestic, but now it looked lonely and withered. Even the ground in front of the gate was covered with fallen leaves. It was obvious that no one had cleaned it for a long time. Now there were only a few old servants left to take care of Lei Haoyan. Naturally they could not take care of such a huge residence. At this moment Lei Haoyan was sitting on the ground. His originally masculine and mighty figure was now dejected. His beard and hair were messy and his eyes were cloudy. Empty wine jugs were scattered around him, and his body exuded a strong smell of alcohol. There was a stooped old eunuch standing next to Lei Haoyan. He looked worried, but he did not try to persuade him because persuasion was useless. Drinking to drown his sorrows might not be a bad choice. Lei Haoyan was an expert at the unity of heaven and man level anyway. This little bit of alcohol would not hurt him. What made Lei Haoyan so dejected was his sadness. Not long ago, when the imperial capital was in turmoil, some color appeared in Lei Haoyan's eyes. However, he just sneered and continued to drink his wine. Cha-cha. Leng Shiqi walked on the path of Prince Ying's palace. He stepped on a thick layer of fallen leaves and came before Lei Haoyan. "You are Lu Xingji," the old eunuch exclaimed. He knew that Leng Shiqi was now one of the 4 chiefs of the Dark Thunder Guards, but what was he doing here at this time? The old eunuch suddenly thought of a possibility. He immediately shouted, "Don't even think about harming His Highness. His Highness has such a loyal servant by his side." Leng Shiqi lightly said. The old eunuch was only at the spirit transformation realm. Leng Shiqi could kill him with a single glance. Lei Haoyan glanced at Leng Shiqi, then took a big gulp of liquor and coughed several times. "Seems that my time is up." In his opinion, the Dark Thunder Guards had always dealt with some shameful matters. Lei Haoga was about to ascend the throne, and as the first prince he definitely couldn't stay. The news of Lei Haoga's death was only known to the upper echelons of the Thunderfire dynasty. It had only been a day since Lei Haoga's death, so Lei Haoyan didn't know and thought that Leng Shiqi was here to kill him. Leng Shiqi shook his head. "Does your highness not want to live anymore?" This was not the majestic First Majesty from Void Scar Sky. "There's only hope as long as you're alive, isn't there?" Lei Haoyan's eyes shifted. "You weren't sent by Lei Haoga to kill me? Lei Haoga? He doesn't have the right to order me around. Oh, I almost forgot. There doesn't seem to be a Lei Haoga in this world anymore." Leng Shiqi slapped his forehead as if he just remembered this. Lei Haoyan suddenly raised his head. His eyes were filled with shock as if he had discovered something incredible. Leng Shiqi had called out Lei Haoga's name without any hint of respect in his tone. Normally he should be addressing Lei Haoga as Crown Prince. That wasn't all. What did Leng Shiqi mean by the second half of his sentence? What did he mean by there was no Lei Haoga in this world anymore? Although Lei Haoyan already understood, he still couldn't believe what he had heard. He still asked, "What do you mean by that? How could the Crown Prince not be in this world anymore? If you're here to make fun of me, please leave." Did I not make myself clear enough? Also, I'm not so bored as to make fun of your highness. I just want to tell your highness to hurry up and tidy up. You can't be the Crown Prince like this. Otherwise, during the Ascension ceremony, not only will your highness lose face, but the Thunderflame dynasty will also lose face. With that, Leng Shiqi took out a golden imperial edict. The light from the edict made Lei Haoyan squint his eyes. By the will of the heavens, the emperor decrees Crown Prince Lei Haoyan to enter the Eastern Palace and choose a day to ascend the throne. By the emperor. Lei Haoyan was stunned. The old eunuch next to him was so shocked that his jaw almost fell to the ground. He even slapped himself twice. He thought he was dreaming. "Your Highness, no, Your Highness the Crown Prince, please accept the edict." Leng Shiqi handed the imperial edict forward. Lei Haoyan was stunned for a moment. Then his eyes burst out with a shocking light. He received the imperial edict with trembling hands. He carefully looked at the imperial jade seal imprint on it. Only then did he believe that everything was true. Leng Shiqi turned his eyes and said, I have something to say to your highness the crown prince. Eunuch, please leave. The old eunuch immediately jumped and said with a face full of surprise, this old servant will leave, this old servant will leave. Lord Lu, please go ahead. At this moment, Lei Haoyan was still carefully touching the imperial edict. This was something he had always dreamed of. He never dreamed that this thing that was not fated to him would fall into his hands in the end. He had experienced many ups and downs. His state of mind had also undergone drastic changes. At this moment he had gone from great sorrow to great joy. Little did he know that this was also the time when a person's state of mind was the weakest. Leng Shiqi's mind moved. 8 ghost slaves appeared. Suddenly the surrounding aura was completely isolated. Lei Haoyan's eyes flashed, but he didn't care too much. He thought that Leng Shiqi really had something to say to him. Then another Leng Shiqi suddenly appeared beside Leng Shiqi. However, that Leng Shiqi was only the size of a 7 or 8-year-old child. That was Leng Shiqi's soul avatar. Lei Haoyan asked doubtfully, Lu Xingji, if you have something to say, just say it. I will remember your favor. Of course, a favor is not enough for me to give your highness the crown prince such a big gift. Leng Shiqi said with a smile, but there was a hint of sinister in his smile. Lei Haoyan was not too surprised. He did not have much contact with Leng Shiqi, but he had heard that he was a greedy person. What do you want? I want you. As soon as Leng Shiqi finished speaking, 6 mysterious vortexes appeared behind him. Each vortex flickered with a multicolored light. In an instant, Lei Haoyan's eyes lost their luster, and his consciousness had already been dragged into the glass samsara realm. He would go through 6 rounds of reincarnation in a row. Every time he went through a round of reincarnation, a part of his consciousness would be wiped out. This was an illusion created by Leng Shiqi when he visualized the 6 paths of reincarnation in the underworld. It was the glazed reincarnation mirror, a rank 7 spiritual skill dream glazed glass, and his comprehension of the Thousand Revolutions fantasy world. Not to mention that Lei Haoyan's state of mind was fluctuating greatly and had long been unstable. Even if he was in a normal state, he would not be able to last more than a few rounds. His consciousness would eventually disappear completely, leaving only a shell. Perhaps only a spirit caster who had condensed a primordial spirit could survive 6 rounds of reincarnation. But even so, after experiencing 6 rounds of reincarnation, would you still remember who you were? These 6 rounds of reincarnation might take decades or centuries for a reincarnator, but in reality, it was only a matter of a few breaths of time. So even if he made it through, he would be muddle-headed and at the mercy of others. This was the terrifying part of the glass samsara realm. And the reason why Leng Shiqi wanted to wipe out Lei Haoyan's consciousness was because of his body. It could also be said that he had taken a fancy to his identity. The Crown Prince's identity. Chapter 734. Leng Shiqi's soul doppelganger was not only used to scare people, but it also had a more important use, which was to possess someone. When he attacked the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, he saw the Thousand Illusion Sword Elder possess Wei Qian's body, which was a reminder to him. After obtaining the soul doppelganger and scaring off 6 Direction Spiritual Elder and the others, he had his own plans. He wanted to use the soul doppelganger to possess a prince. From there, he could indirectly sit on the throne of the Thunderstorm dynasty. However, this goal was not so easy to achieve. First of all, he could not be disturbed during the possession process, let alone be discovered. Especially since Leng Shiqi had never possessed anyone before, it might take a long time. Therefore, the prince that he wanted to possess could not have any experts protecting him. Among the many princes, Lei Haoyan was the most pitiful. He was stripped of his status as a prince and there were only a few old servants in Prince Ying's residence. Lei Haoyan naturally became Leng Shiqi's best target. Other than that, he also had his eyes on Lei Haoyan's powerful cultivation, physical body and purple crystal frost flame. If he possessed Lei Haoyan or Lei Haoyan, he might succeed and sit on the throne. However, Leng Shiqi, who was used to controlling power, naturally hoped that his soul doppelganger would not be too weak. There was another difficulty in possession. When he killed Lei Haoga, he found that Lei Haoga, as the crown prince, already had a treasure to protect him. If not for Leng Shiqi's comprehension of the law of gravity, he might not have been able to kill Lei Haoga. Therefore, Leng Shiqi had to possess a prince before he became the crown prince. In this way, Lei Haoyan was the most suitable candidate. A year ago, Lei Haoyan had predicted that the Spirit Cultivator sect would take revenge, which could be considered as helping Leng Shiqi. At this moment, Lei Haoyan's consciousness had been hooked into the glass reincarnation realm by Leng Shiqi. In his first life he was born as a little beggar, suffering all kinds of humiliation and suffering. His most common sentence was, "I'm the crown prince, I'm the emperor." However, what he received was endless mockery and bullying. When he was in his teens, he starved to death on the streets. Before he died, he still said, "I am the crown prince, I am the emperor." The second life was even worse. Lei Haoyan was reincarnated as a stray dog. He froze to death by the roadside after living for less than 2 years. His eyes were filled with confusion. In his third life, he was finally born into a normal family. At first, he could still vaguely remember who he was. But as time passed, he slowly grew up, got married, had children, raised children, and finally died of old age. It was a peaceful and happy life. When he breathed his last, he had completely forgotten that he was once the first prince of the Thunderflame dynasty. He had also forgotten that he was about to become the crown prince and even the emperor. Lei Haoyan closed his eyes and lost consciousness. He lost consciousness forever. In the outside world, only 3 breaths of time had passed. Lung Shiqi gently waved his hand and retracted the glass samsara mirror. To be able to last for 3 lifetimes is not bad. Then he looked at Lei Haoyan's body. This was a body without a soul and consciousness. With a thought, Lung Shiqi's soul avatar immediately entered Lei Haoyan's body. It immediately broke into his spiritual space and smoothly took over his body. The process was smoother than he imagined. When Lei Haoyan opened his eyes again, he saw a familiar man in a black and red official's uniform. It was Lung Shiqi. Lei Haoyan and Lung Shiqi looked at each other and smiled. This feeling is a bit strange. Lung Shiqi and the soul avatar were both his own consciousness. Just like how his left and right hands were not divided into primary and secondary, they would not affect each other. Now that the soul avatar had its own body, if Lung Shiqi's main body died, he could use the soul avatar's consciousness to continue living. It could be considered an extra life. Lung Shiqi said, "Everything is done. Next, we just have to wait for the coronation. I will go and collect information on Lei Haoyan's daily habits to avoid exposing any flaws." "That's good. You and I are connected. As long as I see the information, I will know. And even if I have some unusual behavior, it's not a big problem. After all, Lei Haoyan has gone through a few ups and downs. It's normal for him to have some changes. All right, since we are connected, there's no need to say anything more. It's a bit weird to talk to yourself." Lung Shiqi did not say this out loud, but in his heart. Lei Haoyan, who was standing opposite him, shrugged. "Isn't it because you wanted to try?" After that, Lung Shiqi turned around and returned to the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards. The old eunuch immediately took his soul doppelganger to bathe and change his clothes. Not long after, Prince Ying's palace welcomed over 1,000 guards and servants. In just a day's time, Prince Ying's palace was cleaned up. At the same time, the news that Lei Haoyan was conferred the title of Crown Prince was released. It was also announced that he would ascend the throne next month. The imperial capital immediately became lively again. The Crown Prince was clearly Lei Haoga, and he was about to ascend the throne. Why was there a sudden change? However, the Thunderfire dynasty did not disclose the details of Lei Haoga's assassination to the public, so everyone could only guess blindly. However, this did not stop the officials and nobles from flocking to Prince Ying's palace to congratulate Lei Haoyan. The Prince Ying's palace, which was still desolate yesterday, suddenly became the most lively place in the imperial capital. It was a kind of irony. Unfortunately, none of them could see Lei Haoyan, because he announced to the public that he was not feeling well and needed to rest for a few days. He would not see anyone. Others thought about it and agreed. Lei Haoyan was originally a useless prince. Once the new emperor ascended the throne, he might be eliminated. From such a precarious situation, he suddenly became the crown prince, and was even preparing to ascend the throne. It was not easy for anyone to recover, so it was normal for him to adjust his mentality. In fact, this was just the soul avatar adapting to this body. Not only did he need to learn Lei Haoyan's habits, speech and movements, he also needed to adapt to Lei Haoyan's own strength. Lei Haoyan had the cultivation of one with the world, and he had also refined the purple crystal frost flame. He needed time to regain control of these things. The soul avatar also went into seclusion for a few days. There was a pleasant surprise. Lei Haoyan's cultivation technique was extraordinary. He cultivated the Thunderfire dynasty's Yang technique, which only the direct descendants of the Thunderfire dynasty's royal family had the qualifications to come into contact with. This technique was comprehended by the Thunderfire dynasty's ancestors from the Thunderfire Heavenly Pearl, and it was abnormally fierce. Especially if one could refine the fire or lightning variants, its power would be multiplied. In terms of rank, it could be called a 9th-tier cultivation technique. Lei Haoyan had already cultivated the Thunderfire Yang technique to the 7th layer, and he was only one step away from the 8th layer, which was the Heaven Origin realm. This technique had developed lightning and fire to the extreme. It just so happened that Leng Shiqi lacked a powerful fire attribute cultivation technique, and his use of the Crimson Gold Earth Dragon Flame was still superficial, which could make up for it. No one would have thought that the Thunderfire dynasty's crown prince, the future emperor, was actually Leng Shiqi. Chapter 735. When Leng Shiqi returned to the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards, everyone looked at him differently. Today, Leng Shiqi could be regarded as the favorite of the king of poor governance. He not only had the right to supervise the 9 provinces, but also had the right to be the acting commander. In the past, when the commander was absent, the 4 directors took turns to take charge of the affairs. But now it was different. As long as the commander was absent, Leng Shiqi would be in charge of the Dark Thunder Guards. It was known that the commander, Lord Black Flame, was not in the imperial capital most of the time. This meant that Leng Shiqi had unknowingly become half a commander. Leng Shiqi had reached such a high position in the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards not long after he came. How could the Dark Thunder Guards not be shocked? Now, in the Dark Thunder Guards, anyone who saw Leng Shiqi still felt a little incredible. Some seniors still found it hard to accept, thinking that Leng Shiqi was not worthy of his position. There were also some young people whose eyes were full of worship and admiration. Leng Shiqi had become their goal and role model, and they couldn't wait to join him immediately. On this day there were more than 60 people sitting in the conference hall of Xingji Pavilion. What was terrible was that 70% of them were masters in the realm of oneness of heaven and men. There were 9 people sitting in the front. They were the 9 deputy directors who belonged to Leng Shiqi. Renyi was sitting in the first row. The rest were all supervisors, who were in the early stage of oneness of heaven and men and in the late stage of Gang Spirit realm. Generally speaking, those who could become supervisors in Gang Spirit realm were all young people who needed to be trained by the Dark Thunder Guards. After Leng Shiqi came in, everyone said in unison, "Greetings, General Director." He glanced at the crowd and found something very interesting. 30 to 40% of the masters present were old men with white hair and beard. It seems that this is a place for them to retire. He thought to himself, but he was still very kind on the surface. Don't be so polite. I never like any red tape. Everyone here only needs to abide by one rule, and that is absolute obedience to me. At this point, the 1000 Illusion Dao sword appeared in Leng Shiqi's hand and then disappeared. Instantly, sword threads as thin as hair intertwined and formed a sword formation above everyone's heads. This was something that Leng Shiqi imitated from the 1000 Illusion Swordmasters battle. Later on, he cultivated the 1000 Illusion Sword Codex and had the 1000 Illusion Dao sword in his hand. He could also use the sword silk formation like the 1000 Illusion Sword Master. Of course, in terms of power, he could not compare to the 1000 Illusionary Sword Master. After all, the 1000 Illusionary Sword Master possessed Wei Qian and was at his peak. However, it wasn't a problem to use it to intimidate these Unity of Heaven realms. The sitting masters immediately felt as if their backs were pierced by the sword qi. The spiritual power contained in the sword qi made these oneness of heaven and men realm experts tremble. Some inner supervisor of Gang Spirit realm were so scared that they broke out in cold sweat. Everyone was secretly sweating in their hearts. As the saying goes, a new broom sweeps clean. Even though this was the first time Chief Steward Liu had gathered the upper echelons of the 9 provinces, it seemed that he wanted to establish his authority. This was within everyone's expectations. However, what was unexpected was the power displayed by Leng Shiqi. At that moment, someone familiar with him secretly transmitted a message. Didn't Lord Liu just break through to the oneness of heaven and men realm not long ago? Why is he so powerful? Didn't you notice that he is already in the middle stage of the oneness of heaven and men realm? He should have broken through from the Gang Spirit realm to the middle stage of the oneness of heaven and men realm. It can be seen that his power is incredible. This is just his cultivation. What makes me more amazed is his power. This sword formation doesn't seem very complicated, but condensing the sword into threads can only be done by sword cultivators in the oneness of heaven and men realm. In addition, he has the 8th level earth weapon, the 1000 Illusion Dao sword in his hand. Just based on this, I'm afraid that he is not weaker than the other 3 chief stewards. His progress is too amazing. He has reached this level in only about 3 years. If he is given a few more decades, what kind of realm will he reach? That's why I said that you should put away your little thoughts and follow this master well. In the future, You will be able to achieve great success with just a little bit of light. Leng Shiqi saw that everyone's expressions were different and knew that they were secretly transmitting a message. He said, I don't have any other meaning. I only have one sentence. Since you are following me, you have to do things according to the way of Xingji Pavilion. I will not care about your little calculations. As long as you do your part well, I will not treat you unfairly. Everyone understood that Leng Shiqi's hand was giving a sweet date after a slap. They said together, this subordinate obeys. Alright, let's all do our own things. There is one thing to pay attention to, and that is to keep an eye on those spirit cultivator sects at all times. Especially the top sects. Leng Shiqi finally reminded them. Those top sects had failed to attack the palace this time. They would not give up so easily, so they had to keep a close eye on them. Following that, Leng Shiqi dismissed everyone. He was preparing to take care of some matters. After all, during his closed-door cultivation he had accumulated some information that he needed to look through personally. But right at that moment, the Ink Frost Ghost Man's voice sounded out again. Midnight, east of the imperial capital. The Ink Frost Ghost Man's voice only said a few words before disappearing. Leng Shiqi opened his supercilious eye, and all the spirit energy within 100 li of him could be seen clearly. After breaking through to the unity of heaven and man realm and condensing his soul, his supercilious eye's range of observation had reached 100 li. However, he still did not see the Ink Frost Ghost Man's chi. This meant that the Ink Frost Ghost Man was not in the imperial capital. He did not know what method he used to transmit his voice to Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi's finger lightly tapped on the handle. The Thunderfire Heaven punishing array had just been closed, and the Ink Frost Ghost Man dared to transmit his voice. Was he not afraid of being detected by the imperial capital's array formation? It had to be said that the Ink Frost Ghost Man's concealment technique was superb, and he was very bold. Since the Ink Frost Ghost Man had taken the risk to stay near the imperial capital, it meant that he had something important to discuss with Leng Shiqi. He guessed that the Ink Frost Ghost Man wanted him to do something for the Blood Garment Pavilion. Then, he left an illusion in his secret room and quietly left the imperial capital. Now, he was no longer the small fry that the Blood Garment Pavilion could manipulate. Even if he had to face the Vice Pavilion Master of the Blood Garment Pavilion alone, he had enough confidence. Late at night, Leng Shiqi arrived at the agreed meeting place alone. However, what he saw was not the Ink Frost Ghost Man, but a human-shaped puppet. The puppet spoke in human language and its voice was very mechanical and stiff. Leng Shiqi, in order to not be detected by the array formation near the imperial capital, I have attached a portion of my spiritual energy to this puppet. Leng Shiqi understood that the Ink Frost Ghost Man had used such a method. With that, he was even more fearless. What instructions does the Vice Pavilion Master have for this disciple? The Ink Frost Ghost Man's words caused Leng Shiqi to listen attentively. The Ink Frost Ghost Man said, "It's time to let you know the real Blood Seed plan." Chapter 736. The Real Blood Seed Plan. Leng Shiqi had guessed correctly. The Blood Seed Plan did not only consist of him, Delta Origi, Yushu, and Meng Ming. He had always wanted to know how many secrets were hidden in this plan and what was its ultimate goal. The puppet possessed by the Ink Frost Ghostly Man said with a piercing voice, the Blood Seed Plan had actually started 100 years ago. There were some outstanding disciples who were placed in other forces. The sects secretly helped them to climb up the ranks in an attempt to return the favor to the sections. However, it was not easy to become a core member of a force. Ordinary talents could only reach the middle level at most. However, relying on the power of the middle level could not bring about great benefits to the Blood Garment Pavilion. The Blood Seed Plan had reached a bottleneck because of this until the Pavilion Master decided to nurture a true prodigy. Therefore there was the Blood Mist Island and the four of you. Leng Shiqi understood the origin of the Blood Seed Plan. The plan had been started a long time ago. There were probably many people from the Blood Garment Pavilion in the imperial capital now. However, he still could not guess the purpose of the Blood Seed Plan. What was the so-called breaking the shackles of the Blood Garment Pavilion? The Ink Frost Ghostly Man continued, the Blood Seed Plan has been going on for more than 100 years. We thought it would continue for another 100 years before it could succeed. However, your improvement is amazing. In just a few years, you have become one of the 4 chiefs of the Dark Thunder Guards. Now you are valued by the Emperor and hold great power. Now you are qualified to know the true purpose of the Blood Seed Plan. When he heard up to here, Leng Shiqi held his breath in concentration. For the sake of this objective, he'd experienced countless storms of blood on Blood Mist Island, and he'd even lost his past memories and experiences. After killing his way out of the Blood Mist Island, he had not stopped for a moment. He had been running around and almost lost his life several times. It was not easy for him to obtain the qualification to know the truth. The Blood Garment Pavilion is one of the top 7 sects in the world. It is one of the top sects and is one of the top sections. The assassins under the Blood Garment Pavilion are feared by countless spirit cultivators. It can be said that they have gained both fame and fortune. However, we are not satisfied with this. The Ink Frost ghostly man's tone suddenly became sharp, revealing boundless ambition. If others had heard this, they would have thought that the Blood Garment Pavilion's higher-ups had lost their minds. The Blood-Robed Pavilion was already a top-notch sect. It had several Sky Origin stage cultivators under its command. The 9 Netherworld Blood-Robed assassins were famous all over the world. Many powerful cultivators had been killed by them. This was already a height that countless people could only dream of. Even if they could reach a fraction of the Blood Garment Pavilion's level, it would be enough for them to smile in the underworld. However, the Blood Garment Pavilion was far from satisfied with this. Wasn't this just looking for trouble for himself? At first, Leng Shiqi also had this idea, but it was just a fleeting thought. The more accomplished a person was, the less satisfied they would be with their current achievements. Leng Shiqi was the same. Logically speaking, he could be considered to have great authority now. He oversaw the 9 eastern counties of the Thunderblaze dynasty and had dozens of Union of Heaven experts under him. He was already a great figure that could cause a commotion with a stomp of his feet. However, Leng Shiqi was never satisfied with the status quo. He was not willing to sit in the position of one of the 4 great chiefs for the rest of his life. Of course, he wanted to continue to climb up and become the commander of the Dark Thunder Guards or even obtain higher authority. In this respect, Leng Shiqi could understand the Blood Garment Pavilion's ambition. Seeing Leng Shiqi's approval, Ink Frost Ghost Man continued, "The Blood Garment Pavilion's strength is not bad, but in fact, it is controlled by others. You haven't been in the sect for long, so you may not have felt it. The feeling of being tied down is enough to drive people crazy. In the eyes of other sects, no matter how strong the Blood Garment Pavilion is, it is just a sword in their hands. They will use it when they need it and abandon it when they don't need it. Those people are afraid of the Blood Garment Pavilion's assassins, but at the same time, they look down on them. After thousands of years of inheritance, the Blood Garment Pavilion has had enough. Therefore, we resolutely decided to change the situation. The Blood Seed plan is to send talented disciples like you into the major forces. When you all succeed in rising to the top, you can secretly bring a lot of resources and benefits to the Blood Garment Pavilion. Most importantly, when the Blood Garment Pavilion rises in the future, it will inevitably be besieged by a large number of sections. At that time, it will be time for you to really show your strength." Leng Shiqi grasped the key point. Rise. What was the Blood Garment Pavilion going to do that it would be besieged by so many sects? In the original plan, we planned to announce to the world in a few decades that the Blood Garment Pavilion will no longer be hidden in the dark and will no longer be a sword in the hands of others. The Blood Garment Pavilion will still be an assassin force, but it will be up to us to decide what kind of assassination missions we accept or not. More importantly, the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion, like the disciples of other sects, can go out to gain experience and compete for opportunities. However, in the past thousands of years, the Blood Garment Pavilion has been shouldering too many grievances. Among the sects in the world, from the top sects to the third-rate forces, almost all of their disciples have been killed by the assassins of the Blood Garment Pavilion. The reason why they have not directly retaliated against us is that, first, they are afraid of our strength. Second, everyone tacitly agrees that the Blood Garment Pavilion will not bear grievances. Otherwise, if they lose this sword, it will be difficult for them to do some things. Even so, in recent years, many people have secretly come to the Blood Garment Pavilion to cause trouble. You should have experienced it. Leng Shiqi nodded. When he was still in the spirit transformation realm, he had bumped into the Tang family at the Donglin County branch. The elder of the Tang family had almost killed him. It turned out that this kind of thing was not rare. So, once the sects rise, those forces who resent us will definitely join forces to destroy the Blood Garment Pavilion. In their eyes, since the Blood Garment Pavilion is no longer willing to be the sword, they will change it. When that time comes, the strength of the sects will definitely not be enough to resist them. We will need your strength. The Ink Frost Ghost Man finally revealed the purpose of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Leng Shiqi understood. He knew that the Blood Garment Pavilion would face a disaster in the future, and this disaster was brought on by their own initiative. Of course, the Blood Garment Pavilion would not seek their own destruction, so they came up with the Blood Seed plan. When these people became the upper echelons of those forces, they would have a lot of power, which would greatly reduce the pressure that the Blood Garment Pavilion had to bear. If a top sect like the Blood Garment Pavilion could not bear it, then it would be fine to add a few more. For example, Lung Shiqi. If he was already the commander of the Dark Thunder Guards when the Blood Garment Pavilion rose, he could have prevented most of the sects in the 9 eastern counties from going against the Blood Garment Pavilion. He alone could have greatly reduced the pressure on the Blood Garment Pavilion. In addition, the Discipline Commission where Delta Orgi was, the Ultimate Saber Hall where Yushu was, and the Purgatory Demon Sect where Meng Ming was, as well as the people who had participated in the Blood Seed plan in the past, there would not be many sects that could go against the Blood Garment Pavilion in the end. Under such circumstances, if the Blood Garment Pavilion was still destroyed, it would be purely because of their own lack of ability, and they could not blame anyone else. However, if the Blood Garment Pavilion really passed this stage, it could be said that they had achieved their goal and could finally establish themselves in the world. Without this layer of shackles, the Blood Garment Pavilion would become more prosperous and powerful. Lung Shiqi had to admit that this was an extremely huge plan that would take hundreds of years, the efforts of several generations, and extremely strong patience to successfully complete. He also had to admire the strategy and determination of the Blood Garment Pavilion's upper echelons. Chapter 737. However, Lung Shiqi had a major doubt. Would the people who participated in the Blood Seed project still listen to the Blood Cloak Pavilion after they became the higher-ups of a force? Lung Shiqi was now one of the 4 great general managers. But he was no longer in awe of the blood-robed pavilion. Now that he had become the commander of the Dark Thunder Guards or reached the Sky Origin stage, his awe of the blood-robed pavilion had disappeared. When the Blood Cloak Pavilion asked him for help, he might not help them. He did not believe that the Blood Cloak Pavilion had not thought of this. They had planned for such a long time and such an important plan. They could not afford any accidents at the core. It meant that the Blood Cloak Pavilion must have their own backup plan. For example, they might have done something to Lung Shiqi and the others. Lung Shiqi muttered in his heart and said, "I understand. What do you need me to do?" Tonight, the Ink Frost Ghostly Man did not come to him just to chat. The Ink Frost Ghostly Man smiled and said, "There is indeed something I need you to do. In fact, the Blood Cloak Pavilion has been trying to change in recent years. We participated in Lei Qingjuan's birthday banquet and this time, to let the other sects begin to adapt to the Blood Cloak Pavilion standing in front of others. You are already the great manager who oversees the 9 eastern counties, so we are going to let the Blood Cloak Pavilion branch in the 9 eastern counties try to change the rules of accepting missions. This will definitely cause dissatisfaction among the local sections. Maybe they will make a big deal out of it. When that happens, you will have to step in." "I see." Lung Shiqi's mind raced. It seemed that the blood-robed pavilion wanted to use the 9 eastern counties under his control as a test subject. This matter was actually not a big deal. As long as it did not cause public outrage, he could suppress it with his status. However, he still said, "This is a bit troublesome. Deputy Pavilion Master, you know that I have not been in office for long. I have just taken over the supervision of the 9 eastern counties. The deputy managers and eunuchs under me have not been completely subdued, let alone the inspectors and supervisors of the various counties. To put it bluntly, my authority is far from enough. It is better to start this after some time. Moreover, we cannot let several counties do this at the same time. Otherwise, there is nothing I can do if there is an accident." The Ink Frost Ghostly Being chuckled, "Don't worry, since we've already waited for so long, there's no need to rush. What I just said will be carried out over the next few years, so it won't make things difficult for you. Moreover, the sect won't let you work for free. I know that with your current status, you don't lack ordinary resources. I think this is what you need." At this moment, the puppet possessed by the Ink Frost Spectre pulled out a piece of its own structure and handed it over. "This is?" Lung Shiqi asked. "It is a jade slip, but there are some restrictive spells on it. Later I will tell you the spell to remove the restrictive spells. Inside the jade slip, there are all the experiences we had when we reached the Sky Origin stage." Lung Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. The experience of breaking through to the Sky Origin stage. This was something that no amount of resources or treasures could exchange for. How many people in the Union of Heaven and Man realm wanted to advance further but had no one to guide them? Only top-notch sects had these things. Even in top-notch sects, not everyone could get their hands on them. In the Blood Cloak Pavilion, Perhaps only the 9 Hades Blood Cloak assassins were qualified. These are only our experiences. They might not be suitable for you, but you can use them as a reference. After you memorize them, destroy the Jade Slip. Do not spread it out. In addition, you and the Delta Orgi are both in the imperial capital. Xiongming is also in Tianshan County. They are under your supervision. It's best if you can help, the Ink Frost Ghostly being advised. Don't worry, Vice Pavilion Master. I understand. Even if the Ink Frost Ghostly being did not say so, Lung Shichi would have done it anyway. It's about time. The Bloodseed project will only begin in a few decades. There's no need for you to rush. You just need to steadily become the Dark Thunder Guard's commander. With that, the puppet in front of Lung Shichi suddenly disintegrated and exploded into a pile of debris. Lung Shichi gently waved his hand and crushed the debris into dust. Only then did he feel relieved and leave. In the following month, the imperial capital could be said to be filled with undercurrents. The sudden activation of the Thunderfire Heaven Punishing Formation and the series of shocking changes yesterday made many people realize that something was wrong. However, the Thunderfire dynasty announced that they were improving the formation. Of course, not many people believed it. At the same time, Lei Haoyan became the crown prince and was about to ascend the throne. The various major forces of the Thunderfire dynasty were undergoing a preliminary reshuffle under the orders of the Shoddy Prince. For example, some of the older members of the Dark Thunder Guard had retired, leaving many positions empty. These positions were left for Lei Haoyan to appoint, so they naturally became Lei Haoyan's subordinates. The situation was similar for the patrol guards and the discipline commission. Even the officials who were qualified to take up positions and the upper echelons of the various provinces were transferred. All of this was to prepare for Lei Haoyan's ascension to the throne. There were also many people who took a fancy to the empty positions and fought for them with all their might. During this process, Lung Shichi was the one who suffered a bit. Because he had many senior subordinates, 30% of the positions were suddenly empty. However, he didn't care. These empty positions would only be filled by stronger people in the future. After all, no one in this world was closer to the emperor than him. Lei Haoyan, or rather, the Lei Haoyan who was possessed by Lung Shichi's soul avatar, was very busy during this period. He had already started to get in touch with the affairs of the Thunderfire dynasty. Every day he was full of social activities. The Shoddy Prince was paving the way for him, but he still had to walk the path himself. It was very important to know the right people. At this time, Lung Shichi's soul avatar sent off the last visitor of the night. The Shoddy Prince then sent someone to invite him into the palace. Soon, Lei Haoyan arrived at the palace. The Shoddy Prince said seriously, "Haoyan, you will ascend the throne the day after tomorrow. There are some things I need to tell you personally. Come with me." Then, the soul avatar followed the Shoddy Prince through layers of formations and came to a room full of Thunderfire energy. There was nothing else in the room except for a stone table in the center. There were a few items placed on it. The soul avatar immediately saw that the Thunderfire heavenly bead was one of them. He thought to himself, this must be the place where the most important trump card of the Thunderfire dynasty is kept. The Shoddy Prince walked to the front of the table and said, "Haoyan, you have experienced a lot in the past 2 years. These might not be trials for you, but opportunities to train your will and state of mind. I have noticed that you are much more mature than before. You are definitely qualified to sit on the dragon throne. I'm very pleased." "Uncle." The soul avatar was about to speak but was interrupted by the Shoddy Prince. "I know what you are thinking. After you ascend the throne, I will go into seclusion in the Dragon Vein. The Thunderfire dynasty will be under your control. However, you still need 2 royal family members to assist you for a period of time. Today I called you here to tell you the biggest secret of the Thunderfire dynasty." Chapter 738. The Soul Clone's heart skipped a beat. The Shoddy Prince was going to tell him all the secrets and trump cards of the Thunderblaze dynasty. The Shoddy Prince picked up the Heavenly Thunderblaze Pearl first. You should be familiar with this item. However, there are still some restrictions on the Heavenly Thunderblaze Pearl. I have decided to remove some of them. At least, the Heavenly Thunderblaze Array can be activated at any time. You have to do this personally after you ascend to the throne. At that time, you will be the only one in the world who knows how to remove the restrictions on the Heavenly Thunderblaze Pearl. This is the first thing you have to do after you ascend to the throne. Remember to delay it." The soul clone nodded. It seemed that the Shoddy Prince wanted him to remove the restrictions and set up new ones. This was exactly what he wanted. Because the Lung Shichi still had a Heavenly Thunderblaze Pearl. As long as he knew how to remove the restrictions, the Lung Shichi would have another treasure. Then the shoddy prince picked up a palm-sized disc. This is a sound transmission disc. Remember, don't use it unless the Thunderblaze dynasty is about to be destroyed. The soul clone stared at the disc. This thing was related to the survival of the Thunderblaze dynasty. Haoyan, on the surface, we only have one mystic comprehending expert, Old Master Qiao. However, that is not the case. Hearing this, the soul clone was shocked. The Thunderblaze dynasty actually had more than one mystic comprehending expert. However, he was puzzled. If that was the case, why didn't they invite the other mystic comprehending experts over a month ago? If that was the case, Six Direction Spiritual Sovereign and the others would not be a threat. They would not have nearly forced the Thunderblaze dynasty into a desperate situation. Actually, the Thunderblaze dynasty has two more mystic comprehending experts hidden in the dark. The shoddy prince said proudly. However, he then sighed softly. However, these two cannot appear as they wish. Why is that? Because they are both in the heavenly tomb. The shoddy prince said in a deep voice, "You have been to the heavenly tomb before. That is where the heavenly origin realm experts of the Thunderblaze dynasty were killed. In fact, there are not only heavenly origin realm experts, there are also two mystic comprehending experts." The spiritual avatar immediately recalled that he had vaguely seen two mysterious figures at the end of the heavenly tomb. Could they be the wills left behind by the Tongshan stage experts? The humble prince continued, "The power of the metaphysical realm is beyond your imagination. Even though they are dead, their minds are still alive. However, they couldn't leave the heavenly tomb easily. Otherwise, their souls would be completely destroyed and the heavenly tomb would cease to exist. Furthermore, the two of them can't fight for long in their consciousnesses. So, we can only ask for their help when the Thunderflame dynasty is on the brink of death." It turned out that the Thunderflame dynasty still had such a terrifying trump card. As expected, they were not a colossus like the three great dynasties. Their foundation was simply too terrifying. The humble prince didn't stop. He put down the round plate and picked up a golden lock. "This is the dragon-resisting lock specially prepared for you. With it protecting you, no one can kill you except for metaphysical realm warriors. Previously I gave one to Lei Haoge as well. Unfortunately, no one would have thought that a Tongshan realm cultivator would really try to kill him. So I asked Old Master Qiao to stay in the palace. Try not to leave the palace unless it's an emergency." Originally, the dragon-resisting lock was enough to keep the emperor safe. However, Lei Haoge's death destroyed this guarantee. Therefore, the humble prince had to ask Old Master Qiao to protect Lei Haoyan secretly. However, Old Master Qiao was a Tongshan realm cultivator after all. He wouldn't come here to protect Lei Haoyan. Therefore, Lei Haoyan had to stay in the palace for a long time. Although Lei Haoyan wouldn't have much freedom, it was still better than being assassinated. In the end, the humble prince took out two jade slips. One of them recorded the way to activate the Thunder Flame Heaven-destroying formation. The other one recorded all the contents of the 9th level cultivation method, the Thunder Flame Ardent Yang technique. It also recorded the experiences of generations of royal experts who practiced this cultivation method. You are very talented in cultivation and have a chance to reach the Sky Origin realm. Don't be blinded by power. You have to work harder in the future. Thank you for your reminder, Royal Uncle." The humble prince was satisfied that Lei Haoyan didn't show any arrogance even though he was about to ascend to the throne. "That's all I have to say. As your royal uncle, I have a gift for you." Speaking of this, the humble prince took out a list. On this list are the young talents I specially selected for you. Every one of them is very useful. Some of them may be inexperienced, but as long as you are willing to train them well, they will definitely be a great help to you in the future. The soul doppelganger opened the list. The first name on the list was Lu Xingji. He wasn't familiar with most of the names on the list. However, the winners of the elite club such as Delta Origi, Di Chuan, Zhugepuha, and Wu Diao were all on the list. The soul doppelganger wanted to test him. He asked, "Royal Uncle, this Lu Xingji is ranked first. I don't have much contact with him, but I can tell that he is an ambitious man. Can we really put someone like him in an important position?" The humble prince pointed at the list and said, "Haoyan, people like Lu Xingji who are easily seen through by others are not that scary. The scary ones are those who look like they have no desires, but are actually ambitious. You can use Lu Xingji as you wish. If he wants power, you can give him power. If he wants resources, you can give him resources. The only thing you can do is to never let him get involved in the royal family. His talent can only be described as monstrous. In the future, he will probably reach the Sky Origin stage and become a great minister. As for him, you don't have to restrict his power. When you feel that you can't control him anymore, you can give him a piece of land. You can even make him a king as long as you can keep him away from the royal capital, which is the center of power." Hearing this, the soul doppelganger sneered in his mind. It turned out that the humble prince thought so highly of him. The humble prince had already prepared a way to control him. However, now that he knew about this, he could make use of this information to do something. "Now that everything is clear, you can go back now. Prepare for the ascension ceremony the day after tomorrow." The humble prince waved his hand. The soul doppelganger bowed and returned to the crown prince's palace. The ascension ceremony was not a small matter. As the crown prince, he had to prepare a lot of things and ceremonies. Soon it was the third day. It was a day that would be recorded in the history books of the Thunderflame dynasty. The ascension of the new emperor. The royal palace was especially grand and solemn that day. Aside from the royal capital, there were also high platforms set up in all the states. All the high-ranking officials gathered there to pay their respects to the emperor. Leng Shiqi, as one of the 4 chief managers of the Dark Thunder Guards, naturally came to the royal palace to participate in his own ascension ceremony. The auspicious time had arrived. Leng Shiqi's soul doppelganger walked to the main hall step by step in the majestic music. Finally, he turned around and sat on the dragon throne. At this moment, he announced to the world that the new emperor of the Thunderflame dynasty was born. Long live His Majesty. Chapter 739. After the coronation ceremony, Lei Haoyin and the courtiers began the court meeting. Now that the shoddy prince had gone into seclusion at the Dragon Vein, the ones standing at the front were not Prime Minister Mo Linhui, but 2 white-haired old men with serious faces. These 2 were relatives of the Thunderfire dynasty's royal family, and they were here to assist the new emperor. Although they were called assistants, they were only a part of it. After all, the new emperor needed advice on how to deal with the country's affairs. However, it was more of an observation to see if Lei Haoyin was suitable to be emperor, and they would make an evaluation of him. Then the royal family would decide if Lei Haoyin could be a puppet emperor or truly hold power himself. These 2 white-haired old men could be considered Lei Haoyin's grandfather, and they were Lei Duanyi and Lei Duanhai. They were standing straight and staring at the person on the dragon throne. Leng Shiqi's soul clone knew that as long as he didn't make any big mistakes in the next 2 to 3 years, there would be no problem. Moreover, if he could make some wise decisions, he might be able to take control of all the imperial power in advance. Now, the first thing the new emperor did after ascending the throne was to confer titles and appointments. Some of the courtiers present would be demoted to idle positions, some would retire and return to their hometowns, and some would be promoted. As for what the outcome would be, it would be up to the emperor to decide. This was also why Eunuch Gao had spent so much effort to nurture his own forces. Only when his wings were strong enough could he show his value and keep his position as one of the 4 great chiefs. After Leng Shiqi became one of the 4 great chiefs, Eunuch Gao knew the result. He would definitely continue to hold on to this position. Although it was possible for the 4 great chiefs to form cliques for personal gain, it showed that Eunuch Gao had sharp eyes and had contributed greatly to the Thunderfire dynasty's talents. In particular, Leng Shiqi had been put in an important position by the shoddy prince. Just this point alone was enough to stabilize Eunuch Gao's position. Afterward, Lei Haoyin took out an imperial edict, and the old eunuch beside him immediately took it and walked to the front of the stage, reading out the names and positions one after another. Immediately, some people in the main hall were happy while others were sad. But in the end, they all had to kneel down to accept the decree and express their gratitude. Among them, Delta Origi was also appointed as the deputy executor of the discipline department. Her cultivation was now at the middle stage of Gang Spirit Realm, which was a whole realm lower than Leng Shiqi, but her cultivation speed was also amazing. Not long ago she had completed an extremely dangerous mission and gained a lot of merits. Thus, she caught the attention of the king of poor governance. In addition, Wu Diao, Di Chuan, and Zhuge Puho were all promoted. Moreover, most of the people who were promoted this time were young people. They were to build their own team for the new emperor. At the end of the imperial edict, Leng Shiqi was also appointed as an imperial guard. For his current identity as one of the 4 great chiefs, being an imperial guard with a blade was nothing. However, the key point of this position was not power but trust. The emperor's trust in him. To a certain extent, this was more important than any reward. Many ministers looked at Leng Shiqi with envy. They could imagine that Leng Shiqi was about to become the favorite of the new emperor, and there were so many benefits. The last appointment was temporarily added by Leng Shiqi's sole doppelganger. As long as he became an imperial guard with a blade, he would be qualified to meet the emperor often without arousing suspicion. Leng Shiqi and his sole doppelganger were telepathic, so there was no need for them to discuss any secrets. However, in this way, it would create an illusion that Leng Shiqi was a favored minister. In the future, no matter what the emperor's sole doppelganger rewarded him, it would not be surprising. The two royal relatives, Lei Duani and Lei Duanhai, looked at each other. The list on the imperial edict was originally prepared by the king of poor governance, but there was no last item. At this time, the sole doppelganger transmitted a sound to them. Elders, before the emperor left, he specially told me that Lu Xingji could be put in an important position. The emperor has already given Lu Xingji the power of acting commander of the Dark Thunder Guards. I can't think of any other reward right now, so giving him a blade guard is just right. Hearing this explanation, Lei Duani and Lei Duanhai nodded their heads. This way, not only did they give a reward, they also showed the emperor's love for talent. Furthermore, they did not give Leng Shiqi any real power. Could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. Your Majesty, it's rare for you to be so thorough. Lei Duani also transmitted a sound, his voice filled with satisfaction. After announcing all the appointments, the most urgent and serious matter for the Thunderflame dynasty was how to deal with the spirit cultivator sects. A month ago, 6 Direction Spirit Sovereign and many other experts from the top sects barged into the palace and almost razed it to the ground, causing the Thunderflame dynasty to suffer a great loss. Although they retreated in the end, it was still like a sword hanging over the head of the Thunderflame dynasty. After that, the Thunderflame dynasty also made some moves such as improving the Thunderflame Heaven Punishing Array. The various Discipline Division and Dark Thunder Guards were all keeping an eye on the various sects, and even some of the combat troops guarding the surrounding borders were mobilized. Even so, the upper echelons of the Thunderflame dynasty were still worried. How could they guard against thieves every night? Rather than blindly defending, they might as well think of other ways. Mo Lin Hui walked forward and cupped his hands. Your Majesty, this old subject thinks that how to deal with the spirit cultivator sects, especially those top sects, is the most important matter for the Thunderflame dynasty. I hope that your Majesty can make a decision. Lei Duani and Lei Duanhai both looked at Lei Haoyan on the dragon throne. He had just ascended the throne and had already encountered such a troublesome matter. They also wanted to see how he would deal with it. Lei Haoyan muttered to himself for a moment and said, "That day when the various top sects attacked the palace I was not there, so I would like to hear your opinion first." A general opened his mouth and said, "Reporting to your Majesty, it is impossible for those top sects to always unite. Moreover, there is already enmity between them. This general believes that while they are unable to react, the dynasty will destroy a few top sects with lightning speed like last time. Let them know the consequences of offending the Thunderflame dynasty. Otherwise, do you know that the people who came last time were only the tip of the iceberg of the top sects?" Someone immediately refuted him. Even if the dynasty destroys a few more top sects, the remaining Sky Origin stage experts will still be several times more than the dynasty. Furthermore, doing so will only expand the conflict between the two sides to the point where they will not rest until one side is dead. This subject thinks that we should first befriend a few of the top sections. As long as we destroy their alliance, they will become a pile of loose sand and no longer be a threat. Let the dynasty lower their voices and curry favor with them? Impossible. The courtiers immediately began to speak one after another. They were mainly divided into two sides, the main ones being in favor of war and the main ones being in favor of peace. None of them could convince the other, and none of them could come up with a method that satisfied everyone. When the courtiers did not have a good idea, Leng Shiqi stood out. "Your Majesty, this subject has a suggestion." Chapter 740. Minister Lu, please speak. The sole doppelganger gestured, and the others immediately quieted down. Leng Shiqi took 2 steps forward and cupped his fists. "Your Majesty is far-sighted. A year ago you predicted that the spirit cultivator sects would counterattack. The truth is indeed so. This humble subject admires you." "That's right." The sole doppelganger nodded. "I have already said that it is impossible to maintain a strong attitude towards the spirit cultivator sects. However, what you said just now is also true. My dignified Thunderflame dynasty cannot bend down to curry favor with them. Therefore, this subject has a plan for your Majesty." "I am listening." Leng Shiqi and the sole doppelganger sang a double act. Leng Shiqi extended his index finger and made a 1 gesture. he said in a clear voice, "the world's first spirit cultivator conference." With these words, the ministers were all confused. It sounded like he wanted to hold a grand event, but with the title of World's First, it was too big. Everyone looked at Leng Shiqi, waiting for his explanation. "I would like to ask everyone, why are the top sects called top sects?" Leng Shiqi did not explain. Instead he asked a question. However, there were still people who answered, "There are Sky Origin Realm experts in the sect. There are no less than 10 experts in the Unity of Heaven realm. They are qualified to be called top sections." This Lord's words are not accurate enough. We usually think that the sects on the world's ranking are called top sections. Just as this Lord said, in reality, it is not only the powers on the world's ranking that have this qualification. For example, after the 1,000 Illusionary Sword sect was destroyed, Pinghui Prefecture's 9 Origin Sword Pavilion fought for the title of 8 Desolate Weapons Path. Leng Shiqi spoke endlessly. As for whether or not the 9 Origin Sword Pavilion can enter the world's ranking, the key lies in one power, and that is Wind Whisper Tower. The world's ranking is set up by Wind Whisper Tower. They use their information network to determine whether or not a sect has the qualifications to enter the world's ranking. For example, the 9 Origin Sword Pavilion and other powers are all fighting to enter the world's ranking and become famous. Do all of you understand what I mean? He spoke for a long time, but did not mention what the so-called world's first spirit cultivator conference was. Instead, he talked about the world sect ranking. If it were anyone else, they would have been confused, but the people standing here were all extremely astute. They also understood the meaning of Leng Shiqi's words. The Falling Star Continent's world sect ranking list listed more than 50 of the strongest sects and forces. The names of these forces were widely known throughout the world. Even ordinary people were familiar with all the top sects and forces. Therefore, whenever a disciple of a top sect went down the mountain to gain experience, it would attract the envy and surprise of countless people. This was also what the top sects were proud of. At the same time, all the top sects never had to worry about recruiting disciples, because every year, a large number of young geniuses would take the initiative to gather, so they could pick and choose. For example, the 1,000 Illusionary Sword sect was already at the bottom of the top sects, but every year many geniuses would still flock to it. In the end, there was only one word that brought about all of this, and that was fame. Fame and fortune, with fame and fortune, it would naturally bring benefits. Although the officials did not guess the exact method of the world's first spirit cultivator conference, they could still guess that Leng Shiqi wanted to use the name of the Thunderblaze dynasty to bring great fame to the spirit cultivator sects and spirit cultivators. As the saying goes, one's mouth is soft after eating someone's food. After the spirit cultivator sects received the benefits brought by the Thunderblaze dynasty, they were naturally unwilling to become enemies with the Thunderblaze dynasty. Only then did Leng Shiqi explain, "Your Majesty, this subject proposes to use the name of the Thunderblaze dynasty to send out invitations and invite all the spirit cultivators in the world to participate in the world's first spirit cultivator conference. From the pure spirit realm to the sky origin realm, everyone can participate regardless of status. All the participants are divided into 4 categories. The pure spirit realm and the spirit transformation realm are divided into one category, which is mainly targeted at those young geniuses. The Spirit Pulse realm and the Spirit Aperture realm are grouped together, the Spirit Astral realm and the Unity of Heaven realm are grouped together, and finally the Sky Origin realm is grouped together. At the beginning of the Spirit Cultivator Conference, the selections will be held in each province. Only the top 10 spirit cultivators of each province will have the qualifications to come to the imperial capital. After layers of battles, the number of winners will be determined according to the different categories, and the rankings will be carried out, which is to imitate the world's ranking of sects and set up a ranking. This subject has initially named it the Dragon Ranking, and has drawn up 4 rankings: the Hidden Dragon Ranking, the Wandering Dragon Ranking, the Flying Dragon Ranking, and the Divine Dragon Ranking. The Hidden Dragon Ranking has a total of 108 positions, and only records the 4 realms of Heaven realm and the young spirit cultivators under the age of 25. The Wandering Dragon Ranking has 72 positions, and they are basically all the best in the Spirit Aperture realm. The Flying Dragon Ranking only has 36 people, and these are all great experts of the Unity of Heaven realm. As for the Divine Dragon Ranking, there are only 12 people, and those who can be listed on this ranking are naturally experts of the Sky Origin realm. Furthermore, the Dark Thunder Guards will use their powerful intelligence network to announce all the names of the dragon ranking to the world in a timely manner. Even if it is a small town or a remote village, it will be announced. If nothing unexpected happens, most of the people on the ranking are disciples of the top sections. As a result, they will immediately become famous. As long as there is a name, there will be more benefits. In this way, those top sects will receive the grace of the Thunderfire dynasty. This subject cannot guarantee that all the top sects will be grateful, but at the very least, more than half of the top sects will not give up this opportunity to become famous, and will definitely repair their relationship with the Thunderfire dynasty. After Leng Shiqi finished speaking, the hall fell into silence. So this was the first Spirit Cultivator Conference. After a long while, Minister Mo Lin Hui clapped his hands and praised, "Wonderful, wonderful." The first Spirit Cultivator Conference will not only greatly ease the relationship between the Imperial Dynasty and the Spirit Cultivator sects, it will also push the reputation of the Imperial Dynasty to an extremely high point. In addition, during the process of the Spirit Cultivator Conference, it will also bring about huge business opportunities for the various provinces and the Imperial capital. Furthermore, we can use this opportunity to find out a large amount of information about the Spirit Cultivator sects. The benefits are beyond imagination. Hearing Lord Lu's words, this old man is enlightened. This old man admires you greatly. The others immediately agreed. The first Spirit Cultivator Conference proposed by Leng Shiqi could be said to be a brilliant plan within a brilliant plan. Even the two Imperial family elders nodded their heads repeatedly. The sole clone on the dragon throne also praised, but in the end he changed the topic and said, "Let's do as you say, but we have to add one more thing. After the first Spirit Cultivator Conference ends, the rankings of the various dragon rankings will also be changed. As long as someone can openly challenge someone with a higher ranking, they can replace them. Every month the dragon rankings will change. What do you think?" Chapter 741. All the officials were moved. If the position of the dragon rankings was still being challenged and changed, then the matter would be even more serious. Especially those young geniuses on the hidden dragon rankings. As long as they cultivated some kind of powerful spiritual skill or possessed an even more powerful spiritual skill, their strength would greatly increase. No one was willing to let their ranking drop, and they would think of ways to increase their strength. This was the attraction and magic of the rankings. This way, the conflicts between the Spirit Cultivator sects would also be aroused and expanded. At that time, they would not even be able to deal with their own internal strife, let alone have the time to deal with the Thunderfire Imperial Dynasty. Mo Lin Hui immediately shouted, "Your Majesty is wise. Your Majesty is wise." All the officials shouted together. Lei Haoyan on the dragon throne chuckled, "Not only that, other than the dragon rankings, I also plan to set up a Phoenix Dance rankings. This ranking is not as complicated as the dragon rankings. There are only 108 places, and all of them are the most beautiful women in the world. Among them, the number one is naturally the number one beauty in the world." As soon as this idea was mentioned, the officials immediately exclaimed that it was wonderful. In this world, the things that could easily make people lose themselves were none other than money, power, and lust. As the saying goes, heroes have a weakness for beauties, and beauties are the tomb of heroes. Since ancient times, how many heroes have fallen under the pomegranate skirt of beauties? By setting up the Phoenix Dance rankings and letting the peerless beauties be known by everyone, then the conflicts surrounding these beauties would naturally appear. Furthermore, the Phoenix Dance rankings itself was a bloodless battle. One had to know that sometimes, a battle between women was even more terrifying than a battle between real swords and spears. When the Phoenix Dance rankings appeared, it would definitely cause an endless storm. At this moment, everyone looked at Lei Haoyan in a different light. This new emperor was much more shrewd than they had imagined. The most troublesome matter in front of them had been resolved in a few words, and he had even proposed a few methods to obtain it in one fell swoop. All of them could be said to be excellent, and in a short period of time, they were completely convinced by Lei Haoyan. The two imperial family relatives felt that Lei Haoyan was no longer the same as before. The impetuosity and impulsiveness of the past had disappeared. It turned out that his thoughts were actually so meticulous. He knew all the sects in the world like the back of his hand, and was even well aware of their weaknesses. It was obvious that he had studied the Spirit Cultivator sects for a long time. It seems that this emperor has chosen the right person. The two elders thought. "What do you think about the dragon ranking and Phoenix Dance ranking?" the soul clone asked. At this moment, Lei Duani raised a question. "There's nothing else. What I'm most worried about is that there will be a large number of experts entering the Imperial City in the near future. That means those Sky Origin stage cultivators who want to harm the Imperial Court can come in openly. Their existence is such a threat to the Imperial Court. The Soul Doppelganger smiled and said, Elder, you're worrying too much. I'm sure they won't cause trouble in the Imperial City, and they wouldn't dare. The Imperial Court and the top sects had just had an intense conflict, and in the blink of an eye, they had invited spirit cultivators to enter the Imperial capital. What would the spirit cultivator sect think? They would think it was a trap. Therefore, the sects that are hostile to the dynasty don't dare to come to Imperial capital. Lei Duani nodded thoughtfully and said, Your Majesty is far-sighted. All the ministers immediately knelt down. Your Majesty is wise. The world's first spirit cultivator assembly was proposed by Minister Liu. We merely modified it slightly. Since this was Minister Liu's idea, you will have full authority to handle this matter. If you need anyone in the process, you can mobilize them at will. The Imperial Edict will be issued soon. This subject receives the edict. With regards to the method of dealing with the spirit cultivator sects, there were still a few matters that were neither big nor small to be discussed. After the court meeting ended, Leng Shiqi began to prepare for the world's first spirit cultivator assembly. This matter would involve the mobilization of all 36 provinces and the imperial capital of the Thunderblaze dynasty. There were simply too many things that needed to be prepared. Even though Leng Shiqi already had plans, it still took him a few days to finalize everything. Following which, the Thunderblaze dynasty announced to the world that they would be holding the world's first spirit cultivator assembly. They also released the news of the establishment of the Dragon ranking and the Phoenix Dance ranking. As for the time, the first round of selections for the various provinces and counties was scheduled for 2 months later, and the second round of the Imperial Capital battle was scheduled for half a year later. Immediately, the entire Falling Star continent was shaken. Especially within the Thunderblaze dynasty, the streets and alleys were filled with intense discussions about the world's first spirit cultivator assembly. Countless people saw a good opportunity to quickly become famous, and there were also people who saw through the scheme behind this. However, even if they knew the intentions of the Thunderblaze dynasty, they still couldn't help but want to participate. It could be said that this was an open conspiracy. I want to participate in the world's first spirit cultivator assembly. I will definitely be on the Hidden Dragon ranking. A youth in the marketplace raised his head and said, Don't joke around you? You couldn't even enter a second-rate sect last year, and you want to be on the Hidden Dragon ranking? I think you won't even be able to pass the first round. In a restaurant next to a few youths. Brother Wang, you and I have been rogue cultivators for more than 20 years. It wasn't easy for us to cultivate to the spirit aperture realm, but we are still looked down upon by those spirit cultivator sections. The world's first spirit cultivator assembly doesn't care about one's background, it only looks at one's strength. We can give it a try. Once we are on the Wandering Dragon ranking, we will be famous throughout the world. Even if we establish a sect, there will be a large number of disciples following us. That's right, I have the same intention. The upper echelons of the Tang family, a first-rate sect in Donglin County, gathered together. The world's first spirit cultivator assembly is a good opportunity for my Tang family to become famous. In 3 days there will be a small competition within the family. All the winners will be able to participate. Patriarch Tang Wanqiu's cultivation has improved very quickly, and her strength is not bad. She might be able to compete for the qualifications to be on the Wandering Dragon ranking. However, she has always been at the back of the mountain and doesn't want to communicate with others. What should we do? It's related to the Tang family's reputation. She can't be willful. The meeting hall of the top sect, the Supreme Saber Hall, was not calm either. Hall Master, forgive me for being blunt, but you can't go. That's right, Hall Master. The sect needs you to personally oversee it. The Hall Master of the Supreme Saber Hall, Fu Yingxi, was full of fighting spirit. You don't have to say any more. I have already decided to participate in the world's first spirit cultivator assembly. My name will definitely be on the Divine Dragon ranking. Seeing him like this, the elders and genius disciples couldn't persuade him anymore. Actually, as the leader of a top sect, he couldn't leave the sect as he pleased, let alone participate in the spirit cultivator assembly of the Thunderblaze dynasty. Don't forget, the Supreme Saber Hall was also among those who attacked the imperial capital a month ago. They were afraid that this was a trap. If something happened to Fu Yingxi, it would be a huge blow to the Supreme Saber Hall. Yushu, who was in the crowd, rolled his eyes and then smiled strangely. At this time, in the Extraordinary Force 6 Direction Spiritual Region, 6 Direction Spiritual Sovereign frowned. He carefully looked at the information about the world's first spirit cultivator assembly in his hand. After a long time, he sighed faintly and said, "Good move, a good move." Chapter 742. The preparations for the world's first spirit cultivator conference were in full swing. The core cities of the various states and counties were packed with people, and the Thunderblaze dynasty was unprecedentedly lively. On this day, a handsome young man walked into Donglin town. He was dressed in a black robe and carried a long sword on his back. He looked quite dashing. He went straight to the entrance of the city lord's mansion. This was also the place to register for the world's first spirit cultivator assembly. It had already been more than a month since the registration began, but there was still a long queue. Although the city lord's mansion had already sent out a large number of people, and there were more than 10 places where one could register, there were simply too many people. This was especially true for youths below the 4 realms of celestial being. There were simply too many to count. The black-clothed youth consciously stood at the back of the group. There were at least 200 people in front of his group. Fortunately, it wasn't too troublesome to register. He estimated that it would be his turn in about 2 hours. The popularity of the world's first spirit cultivator conference is truly unexpected, he muttered. That's right. Someone had appeared behind the black-clothed young man at some point in time. Naturally, he continued the conversation. The black-clothed youth turned around and saw a middle-aged man with a wooden skewer hanging from the corner of his mouth. This person's face was black and his teeth were yellow. When he opened his mouth, one could smell the stench of his breath. However, the black-clothed youth didn't mind. He seemed to be bored and started chatting. "Uncle, are you here to sign up as well?" "Uncle? Do I look that old?" "I'm only a few years older than you," the black-faced man said with a face full of dissatisfaction. As he spoke, he even wiped his face as if trying to make it look whiter. The black-clothed youth immediately smiled and said, "I was rude. Please don't blame me, big brother." "That's more like it. My name is Suji. Feels good to be called big brother. I'm definitely going to befriend you." Suji waved his hand with a heroic look. "So it's big brother Su I am." The young man in black paused for a moment before saying his name. "I am Leng Shichi." That's right, this black-clothed youth was Leng Shichi. After he had arranged everything for the world's first spirit cultivator conference, there was nothing for him to do for the time being. At the very least, he would be fine until the second round of the imperial capital. Even if there was an accident, there would be someone to take care of it. Ever since he had broken through to the one with the world realm, the teleportation range of his fate skill had expanded to 5,000 miles. Coupled with the Gu King's wings, he could travel 7,000 to 8,000 miles in a day at full speed. Of course, Leng Shichi was not out for sightseeing. He visited all the 9 prefectures as fast as he could, and Donglin County was his last destination. He had 3 purposes for doing this. First of all, he was traveling incognito. He did not reveal his identity when he traveled through the 9 provinces. Instead, he was secretly observing the behavior of the Dark Thunder Guards. Secondly, he wanted to greet the Blood Garment Pavilion branches in the 9 prefectures so that they could also participate in the world's first Spirit Cultivator Conference. Moreover, he also discussed with them the order of changing the Blood Garment Pavilion's mission rules, as well as what they should pay attention to. This matter was requested by the Ink Frost Ghoul, and Leng Shichi also agreed to it. However, he really did not wish for a big mess to happen within his jurisdiction. As for the third reason, he also wanted to participate in the world's first Spirit Cultivator Conference. Leng Shichi, as the initiator, could not participate in this matter in principle, but it did not mean that he could not use other identities. Donglin County was the last stop of his trip, and also the first prefecture he had come to after leaving Blood Fog Island. He decided to register in Donglin County. The reason why he did not casually use a fake name but used his real name in this life was that he felt that there was no need to be timid. In this world, there were very few people who knew that he was Leng Shichi. At most, some people in the Blood Garment Pavilion branch in Donglin County had heard of this name. In addition, the Tang family, a first-class force in Donglin County, should also remember this name. After all, Leng Shichi had killed the genius of the Tang family, Tang Hepu, and was secretly wanted for a period of time. At the mention of the Tang family, killing intent flashed in Leng Shichi's heart. Since he had come to Donglin County, he did not mind ending this feud and eliminating a hidden danger. Leng Shichi. Suji repeated it twice. This name is a bit strange. Are you the 17th in your family? Brother Su, you guessed it. In fact, I am an orphan. I was adopted by the master when I was young. I am the master's 17th disciple, so I got the name, Leng Shiqi replied. Su Ji touched his head and said bitterly, don't blame me for mentioning your sad story. Leng Shiqi waved his hand. It doesn't matter. Brother Su, you don't have to take it to heart. I see that your cultivation is profound. I wonder which sect you are from. Su Ji raised his head slightly and said with some pride, Brother, you can see that my cultivation is profound. You have a good eye. As for the sect, to tell you the truth, there is no sect in the world that can catch my eye. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi did not know what to say. He could see at a glance that Su Ji's cultivation was only in the spiritual pulse realm, and the spiritual energy in his body was very mixed. He could basically tell that he broke through by force. It was already good enough for someone like him to become a deacon elder in a third-rate sect. He was clearly a wandering cultivator with no future, yet he was still showing off. But Leng Shiqi couldn't care less. He was just casually talking to pass the time. Brother Su, you have a heart of mountains and seas. I admire you. You're too kind. By the way, who is your master? Leng Shiqi hesitated and said, I can't casually reveal my master, but I feel like old friends with Brother Su at first sight. I can't bear to lie to you. My master is the Wave Island Sword Monarch. Su Ji was stunned. Not because of anything else, but because he had never heard of this Wave Island Sword Monarch. However, seeing Leng Shiqi's cherished look and the title of Sword Monarch, Su Ji guessed that Leng Shiqi must have an extraordinary background. He cupped his hands and said, Brother, you are the disciple of the Wave Island Sword Monarch? I am so envious. Leng Shiqi laughed in his mind. He didn't just randomly make up the title Wave Island Sword Monarch. He used it to cover his own identity. The Wave Island Sword Monarch was actually a powerful wandering cultivator from overseas. He was in the Sky Origin stage. It was said that he once sat alone on an isolated island for dozens of years to learn a trace of sword intent. In the end, he reached the Sky Origin stage. On that day, sword will soared into the sky, and waves surged into the sky, directly engulfing that island. That was why he was called the Wave Island Sword Monarch. The Wave Island Sword Monarch had always been a mystery. In fact, according to the Dark Thunder Guards, he had died in a dangerous place. It was just that outsiders didn't know about it. Moreover, the Dark Thunder Guards also collected his corpse and even accidentally obtained a part of his inherited cultivation method. Unfortunately, it was only broken. When Leng Shiqi found out about this, he secretly cultivated the incomplete technique left behind by the Wave Island Sword Monarch and disguised himself as his disciple. The Wave Island Sword Monarch was a spirit cultivator from overseas and had disappeared for dozens of years. As long as the Wave Island Sword Monarch's close relatives didn't appear, Leng Shiqi was confident that no one would be able to see through his disguise. Time passed as Leng Shiqi and Su Ji talked back and forth. When it was Su Ji's turn, the person on duty handed him a pen and said, Write down your name, origin, cultivation, and who your master is. He waved the pen and wrote down his name, Leng Shiqi. Chapter 743. After writing down his name, Leng Shiqi then wrote down his cultivation, oneness of heaven and man. He did not plan to hide his cultivation, because he was aiming for the Flying Dragon list's rankings. Moreover, he also wanted to see how much strength he could show in his other identities other than those abilities that everyone was already familiar with. In addition, he had another ulterior motive. When the person in charge of registration saw the words, oneness of heaven and man, his hands suddenly trembled. His eyes widened and he quickly stood up. He thought it was an expert from some sect and wanted to flatter him. However, after he saw that Leng Shiqi was just a young man, his expression instantly became gloomy. Where did this brat come from? How dare he write nonsense about his cultivation? What nonsense? You're affecting other people's time. Believe it or not, I can ban you from registering right now. His loud noise immediately attracted the attention of many people. After all, waiting in line was a boring thing. A little excitement quickly attracted everyone's attention. Su Ji, who was standing behind Leng Shiqi, stretched his head out to take a look and laughed. I say, brother, your cultivation realm is too ridiculous. I think you're already a genius if you can reach the spiritual pulse realm at your age. The oneness of heaven and man is too exaggerated. He thought Leng Shiqi was joking. Forget it. Since you're young and ignorant, quickly change it so as not to delay other people's time, the person who registered said impatiently. Leng Shiqi didn't speak. He stroked the long sword on his back. In an instant, a shocking sword cry resounded through the sky. The soaring sword intent stirred up the wind and clouds. All the spirit cultivators in front of the city lord's mansion painfully covered their ears. Even the entire Donglin city was affected. Several figures immediately rushed out of the city lord's mansion. They were all great masters of the oneness of heaven and man realm. Among them was City Lord Feng Luan, whom Leng Shiqi had met when he came to participate in the elite meeting. Feng Luan focused and said, "Who's the master here? Making a move in the city is too disrespectful to the city lord's mansion." At this moment, everyone's gaze turned towards Leng Shiqi. The few Unity of Heaven realms were extremely surprised when they saw how young Leng Shiqi was. Looking at Leng Shiqi's appearance, he seemed to be in his 20s. How could he reach the Unity of Heaven and Man realm at such a young age? Even the strongest genius disciple of the four saint spiritual realms couldn't do this. However, the shocking sword intent on Leng Shiqi's body showed that he was in the Unity of Heaven and Man realm. This could not be faked. It could be seen that the background of this black-clothed youth was definitely not simple. Leng Shiqi retracted his sword intent and said with a smile, "I am Leng Shiqi, and I have come from the East Sea to participate in the world's first Spirit Cultivator Conference. However, this mister doesn't believe in my cultivation, so I had no choice but to resort to this method. Please excuse me." The people who were extremely dissatisfied with Leng Shiqi were now dumbfounded and had yet to recover from their shock. Feng Luan's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise. It's actually a young elite from overseas who has reached the Unity of Heaven and Man realm at such a young age. This is the first time I've seen someone like you. Young friend Leng, you may not know this, but in Donglin County, anyone in the Unity of Heaven and Man realm or the Divine Origin realm can directly enter the City Lord's mansion to save their lives. There's no need to line up here. Young friend, please come in. That's good too. Leng Shiqi nodded. Just as he was about to enter the City Lord's mansion with Feng Luan and the others, there was a commotion not far away. Leng Shiqi turned to look and saw a beautiful figure rushing out of the crowd. There were only a few people following behind her. She's trying to escape. Catch her. Tang Wanxiu, this is a good opportunity for you to gain fame for the Tang family. How dare you escape? Are you still a member of the Tang family? Don't forget that your mother is still living in the cottage in the back mountain. Even if you don't think for yourself, you should think for her. Tang Wanxiu? Leng Shiqi heard this name and felt that it was somewhat familiar. A thought flashed through his mind and he finally remembered that he had met this Tang Wanxiu twice. The first time was when he and Feng Sharmo destroyed the third-rate Golden Wing Academy. At that time, the Tang family's genius Tang Heimu and Tang Wanxiu accidentally broke in. In the end, Tang Heimu died at the hands of Leng Shiqi while Tang Wanxiu escaped. It was also because of this that Leng Shiqi was secretly wanted by the Tang family. The second time was in the illusory spirit secret realm. They had joined hands to deal with the wraiths inside. Since then they hadn't seen each other again. Now, Tang Wanxiu's cultivation was at the Spirit Aperture Realm middle stage and could even attempt to break through to the Spirit Aperture Realm late stage. This kind of cultivation progress was extremely rare even in the top sects, let alone the Tang family. This is strange. Leng Shiqi thought to himself. He clearly remembered that Tang Wanxiu broke through to the spiritual pulse realm by force with external objects, which was very similar to Su Ji's situation. It was reasonable to say that Tang Wanxiu's cultivation would stay at the spiritual pulse realm for the rest of her life. It was basically impossible for her to break through to the Spirit Aperture realm, let alone the Spirit Aperture realm middle stage. There was something strange about this. Leng Shiqi's eyes flashed. He suddenly remembered that when he was in the spiritual pulse realm and the Spirit Aperture realm, his cultivation progress was also very fast. The reason was that the spiritual pulse and the spirit aperture in his body had been opened long ago, and the person who opened these spiritual pulse and the spirit aperture was Meng Tianzong, the most powerful man 10,000 years ago, the ruthless man who sacrificed all the disciples of his sect in order to break through to the next realm. Leng Shiqi remembered that there used to be a phantom of Meng Tianzong in the spiritual space, but after he broke through to the spirit aperture realm, it disappeared inexplicably. Gradually he forgot about this matter. Now that he saw Tang Wanxiu and thought of Oziu, a possibility suddenly appeared in his mind. That was whether the people who came out of the phantom spirit secret realm alive in the end would all make rapid progress like them. If so, it meant that they had all been tampered with by Meng Tianzong. It was absolutely impossible for that crazy and ruthless person to bestow an opportunity to others for no reason. Perhaps he had other intentions. This made Leng Shiqi feel a little worried. At this time, when Tang Wanxiu heard the last sentence just now, her footsteps suddenly stopped, and then she smiled sadly. Since she was born, her fate had been led by the Tang family, and she had never had the slightest freedom. In the eyes of the Tang family, she, a girl born of a concubine, was at most a tool. In the past, in order to have a genius disciple in the spiritual pulse realm to act as a shield, the Tang family forced her to break through, which almost cut off her future of cultivation. Fortunately, she was not without a bit of luck. Since coming out of the phantom spirit secret realm, she found that her cultivation was extremely fast, and even there were no bottlenecks between the small realms. Very quickly, she cultivated to the spirit aperture realm, but the Tang family still did not value her, and was even chased to the back of the mountain. It was not for anything else, but because she covered up the glory of the direct descendants. In the cultivation family, the concept was very important. Men were superior to women, and the difference between the direct descendants and the concubines was so strict. Now that the world's first spirit cultivator assembly had appeared, the Tang family thought that this was a good opportunity. Thinking of her as a concubine's daughter, they forced her to participate. However, Tang Wanxiu was very stubborn. Just now, when everyone was alarmed by Leng Shiqi's sword intent, she tried to escape, but she could not let go of her loved ones. In the end, she seemed to have accepted her fate and obediently walked back to the registration place. The people chasing her all sneered, mocking her one after another. Her face was ashen, as if she did not hear anything. Seeing this, Leng Shiqi was deep in thought, and he already had a plan in his heart. Chapter 744. This farce was nothing to Feng Luan and the other higher-ups. Feng Luan continued to invite Leng Shiqi into the city lord's mansion. It was only then that Su Ji, who was behind Leng Shiqi, recovered from his shock. He stammered, "Brother, oh no, senior, why you're in the unity of heaven and man realm. The realm is nothing. I also want to thank Brother Su for accompanying me for so long," Leng Shiqi said politely. He patted Su Ji's shoulder lightly, and then an extremely pure aura surged into Su Ji's body. In the blink of an eye, all of his spirit veins were cleansed. Su Ji's originally heterogeneous spirit energy was completely refreshed, making him feel so comfortable that he couldn't help but close his eyes. This also meant that the hidden dangers in his cultivation had been removed, and his future cultivation would be twice the result with half the effort. By the time Su Ji opened his eyes, Leng Shiqi had already entered the city lord residence. Leng Shiqi had a strange expression as he said, "I'm actually addressing a great expert at the union of heaven and man realm as brothers. I'm afraid I'm not dreaming, right?" When Leng Shiqi walked in, there were already more than 20 people sitting in the city lord's mansion. At a glance, these people were all in the unity of heaven and man realm. Such a lineup would be shocking outside, but in Leng Shiqi's eyes, it was nothing. After all, he had far more experts in the unity of heaven and man realm under his command. He looked around and found that 1/3 of the people in this group were wearing yellow and blue clothes. Upon closer inspection, there were 8 people. These 8 people were all from the top sect, the Mountain Sea sect. There were also 3 or 4 people from the Wu and Tang families, and one of them was an old acquaintance of Leng Shiqi. This person's name was Tang Haoqing, the Tang Haoqing who almost killed Leng Shiqi a few years ago in front of the Blood Cloak Pavilion branch. At that time, Tang Haoqing was still in the spirit astral realm, but now he had broken through to the unity of heaven and man realm. However, he was only in the early stage and was at the bottom of the crowd. For him to participate in the world's first spirit cultivator assembly with such a cultivation, it must be out of helplessness. This also meant that the Tang family was indeed declining. When Leng Shiqi saw Tang Haoqing, a murderous intent flashed in his heart. This was the so-called enemies meet on a narrow road. In addition to these 3 forces, there were also a few rogue cultivators. As for the rest, they were experts from the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards. As direct subordinates of the Thunderblaze dynasty, the experts of the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards were naturally qualified to participate in the first Spirit Cultivator Conference. However, in order to avoid arousing suspicion, the people from the City Lord's mansion were not allowed to participate. When the experts in the room saw Leng Shiqi come in, they were all shocked because Leng Shiqi was too young. In fact, the current Leng Shiqi was his original appearance. He was not disguised and he was only 20 years old. Of course, as long as it was a spirit cultivator of the 4 realms of heaven, they could not judge their age purely from their appearance. At first, they thought that Leng Shiqi had specially cultivated a technique to preserve his appearance. However, one of the experts with green eyes said in surprise, "Your bone age is only around 20 years old, how is that possible? With these words, the experts went from surprise to shock. There were even a few people who stood up and stared at Leng Shiqi with burning eyes. Even Feng Luan, who came in with Leng Shiqi, was the same. He was stunned for a moment before saying, "Little friend Leng is actually so young. The younger generation will surpass us in time, the younger generation will surpass us in time." The expert of the Shiju Wu turned his head and asked, "Old Qing, are you sure?" Old Qing said disdainfully, "This old man's divine eyes of azure glass can see through everything. If I can't even see through a mere bone age, I'll just slit my own throat." The others were silent. Although Old Qing's words were a bit exaggerated, his divine eyes of azure glass was indeed mysterious. It was not a problem to see through bone age. If that was the case, then Leng Shiqi's identity was worth guessing. Generally speaking, it was already very rare for a top sect to break through to the spirit pulse realm in their early 20s. Leng Shiqi was good. He directly jumped 3 realms and was on the same level as them. What kind of terrifying cultivation talent was this? Not only was it cultivation talent, but everyone present had also experienced the process of breaking through to the spirit crystal realm. They knew that the most important thing in breaking through to the unity of heaven and man realm was comprehension. This also meant that the young man standing in front of them, whether it was cultivation talent or comprehension, was extremely high. One had to know that most of the people present were in their 70s or 80s. Even Old Qing was over 100 years old. Compared to him, they felt ashamed of their inferiority. They were all humans, but why was there such a big difference? Moreover, they were certain that even the 4 sacred spirit realm could not have such a monstrous genius. Therefore these 2 words appeared in their minds. The Yin and Yang halls. Could this young man be a disciple of the mysterious Yin and Yang halls? Leng Shiqi was the first to salute. "I am Leng Shiqi, a rogue cultivator from outside the sea. Greetings, everyone." A rogue cultivator from outside the sea? Hearing this, everyone was in disbelief. There were many spirit cultivator factions outside the sea, but the only ones that could truly be brought out were the 1 or 2 top factions from Falling Jade Island. It was impossible for such a monstrous genius to appear. This was nothing more than an excuse. However, it was not good for them to delve deeper. An imposing expert from the Mountain Sea sect stood up and said, "So it's an expert from outside the sea. Mountain Sea sect's Chang Feng Yu greets you." The others also began to exchange pleasantries. They all thought that Leng Shiqi's background was extraordinary, and there were only benefits and no disadvantages to befriending him. Moreover, they might soon become opponents, so it was not bad to take the opportunity to gather some information. Leng Shiqi could not avoid it. This time his character was set to be kind and humble, so he could not break it. Soon he gradually blended into the crowd, and at night, he even drank to his heart's content. After that, he lived in the city lord's mansion. Half a month later, the auditions were finally about to begin. On this day, Leng Shiqi and the other Unity of Heaven realm experts gathered again. The only difference was that the atmosphere was not as harmonious as before, because today was the day to announce their opponents for the first round. After half a month, a few more Unity of Heaven realm cultivators had signed up. Now there were 32 people. In the end, only 10 of them would be able to go to the imperial capital, which meant 22 people would be eliminated. Moreover, these were all famous figures, so losing would be shameful. Thus, whether their opponents in the first round were strong or weak had a lot to do with it. Naturally, there were strong and weak people present. The strongest were undoubtedly Chang Feng Yu and the others from the Mountain Sea sect, as well as the Tang family's patriarch Tang Haoquang and sect master Wu of the 10 Absolutes, Huang Shiwan. These people were basically locked in one of the 10 spots. The weakest was obviously someone like Tang Haoqing, who had just broken through. Anyone who met him could be considered lucky. Feng Luan walked in and flicked his finger. Suddenly, 32 spirit lights of different colors shot out. Everyone is old acquaintances, so the rules of drawing lots are very simple. Those who draw the same color will be their opponents. There are 32 people in total, so we need the second round to determine 8 spots. As for the last 2 spots, they will be determined through the arena battles. The rules were indeed very simple. Everyone stared at the spirit lights in the air. With a thought from Feng Luan, the spirit lights began to rapidly spin without any pattern. After a few breaths, all the spirit lights scattered and landed in front of everyone. Leng Shiqi had a faint yellow spirit light in front of him, and another spirit light of the same color was in front of Tang Haoqing. Chapter 745. Enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. Leng Shiqi thought to himself. He looked at Tang Haoqing and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. At the same time, Tang Haoqing also looked over. When he saw that his opponent was Leng Shiqi, he let out a sigh of relief. It was very difficult to tell the exact level of the unity of heaven and man realm at a glance. After all, the strength of the unity of heaven and man realm was related to the amount of elemental energy one could use. Without fighting, no one could figure out the other's strength. In Tang Haoqing's opinion, since Leng Shiqi had entered the unity of heaven and man realm at such a young age, he must only be at the early stage. They were at the same level, so it was not certain who would win. He thought that he still had a chance. City Lord Feng Luan moved his finger, and the spirit light changed into each person's name, which was listed in pairs. The first round of battle list is here. The battle will begin tomorrow. The venue will be provided by the City Lord's residence. Everyone prepare well. After he finished speaking, he left. When the experts of the Tang family saw the name Leng Shiqi, they exchanged glances. This name had left a deep impression on them. This was because Leng Shiqi had killed the Tang family's genius, Tang Hepu, a few years ago. Of course, Leng Shiqi was not the only one who had killed their family's genius. Bing Shang had also killed another genius, Tang Heyu. However, the Tang family had a clearer memory of Leng Shiqi. This name was very special. Who would use a number as a name? Moreover, 17 was a number that did not have any meaning. However, Leng Shiqi had never used this name in front of outsiders in the past few years, and the Tang family had long given up on it. They did not expect to see this name again today. These days, everyone had been calling Leng Shiqi young friend Leng. Moreover, the Tang family did not get too close to Leng Shiqi, so they only knew his full name now. The Tang family's patriarch, Tang Haoquang, said, "Do you still remember Leng Shiqi? Of course, this is the person who killed Tang Hepu." Tang Haoqing was the first to speak. Another elder of the Tang family said, "This mysterious young man is also called Leng Shiqi. Could they be the same person?" No, that Leng Shiqi is a black-clothed assassin from the Blood Garment Pavilion. No matter how talented he is, it is impossible for him to cultivate from the spirit transformation realm to the unity of heaven and man realm in just a few years. That's true. But it's strange that Leng Shiqi has the same name. Haoqing, this person has a mysterious background. You have to be careful. They all felt that this Leng Shiqi was definitely not the Leng Shiqi they knew. However, they would never have dreamed that the Leng Shiqi had cultivated all the way to the unity of heaven and man realm in just a few short years. On the second day, the world's first spirit cultivator assembly officially began. The competition rules for each cultivation realm were different. There were very few people in the realm of unity of heaven and man. It was a one-on-one competition, but there were too many spirit cultivators below the fourth realm of heaven and man. There were tens of thousands of them. If they were to compete one by one, how long would it take? Therefore, the competition method used by the low-level spirit cultivators was very cruel, but it was also very efficient. This was the inspiration that Leng Shiqi received from the Blood Mist Island. It was to let tens of thousands of low-level spirit cultivators gather in the array and then kill each other regardless of friend or foe. Everyone had a token on them. In a life-and-death situation, as long as they took the initiative to crush the token, they could leave the array at any time. Of course, this also meant that they were eliminated. In the end, only the few people who remained were qualified to enter the competition. When the rules of the competition were announced, all the low-level spirit cultivators were stunned. Tens of thousands of people fighting, just thinking about it made them shudder. Even if they could leave by crushing the token, with so many spirit cultivators in the chaotic battle, it was still unknown whether they would have the chance to crush the token. Therefore, some people directly gave up on the spot. Leng Shiqi and the others did not know about this, because the competition venue of the unity of heaven and man realm was hundreds of miles away from Donglin City. This was a barren mountain, and the surrounding 100 miles were sealed off. They were afraid that the battle between the unity of heaven and man realm would be too terrifying and harm the innocent, so they chose this place. Feng Luan and the other experts of the City Lord Mansion were the judges. "Everyone, we don't have many people, and the competition between the unity of heaven and man realm is very rare. Let's start one by one." The others also tacitly agreed. After all, everyone was in the unity of heaven and man realm, and the fight between each other was indeed worth watching. The first two opponents were a bit special because these two people were from the top sect, Mountain Sea Sect. This time, the Mountain Sea Sect sent a total of 8 experts, which indeed showed the strength of the Mountain Sea Sect, but also made the possibility of internal strife very high. "Senior Brother Lu, the last time you and I fought was at the sect competition more than 20 years ago, right?" "That's right. That time I was lucky to win. I hope junior brother Feng will do his best this time. The two of them tried peaceful means before resorting to force, and the others were watching them attentively. A green and white light flashed in Leng Shiqi's eyes. These two experts of the Mountain Sea sect had the same cultivation, which was the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. Moreover, the cultivation method they practiced was the same, so to determine the winner, it depended on something other than cultivation and cultivation method. For example, spiritual weapons or some secret methods that one obtained through chance. Whoever had the advantage in this aspect had a greater chance of winning. Sure enough, the two of them were completely evenly matched at the beginning, and in the end, senior brother Lu won by relying on a defensive magical item. Junior brother Feng, thank you for letting me win. Senior brother Lu's skill is still better. I admit defeat. Feng Luan stood out and said, Lu Gaoi of the Mountain Sea sect wins. Next, Tang Haoqing of the Tang family will fight against Leng Shiqi, the overseas rogue cultivator. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi lifted his feet and his figure flashed out. He was a little surprised that it was his turn so soon, but it didn't matter. Tang Haoqing of the Tang family fiercely stomped on the ground, and with a loud bang, a pillar of fire shot up into the sky, causing him to fly high into the air. In the end, he crashed to the ground, creating a huge pit in the ground. Tang Haoqing's actions were naturally to show his strength, but in Leng Shiqi's eyes, Tang Haoqing's weakness of not being very proficient in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was exposed. Leng Shiqi pulled out the long sword on his back. It was actually a very ordinary fifth-stage spiritual sword. A great expert of the unity of heaven and man realm with a fifth-stage spiritual sword? It couldn't be so shabby. Or perhaps he didn't put Tang Haoqing in his eyes? Tang Haoqing's expression suddenly became gloomy. He waved his fists and raging flames bathed his body. The fire spiritual energy of heaven and earth became violent, and the temperature within a radius of dozens of miles rose sharply. Tang family Tang Haoqing. Leng Shiqi lightly pointed his long sword, and his entire body instantly became like a sharp sword piercing through the sky. In his eyes there was no heaven, no earth, no self and no other. There was only the sword. Sect leader Wu of the 10 Absolutes, Huang Xiwan, immediately exclaimed, Sword Heart Illumination. Chapter 746. Hearing Huang Xiwan's shout, the rest of the people were shocked. The brilliant sword heart was a transcendent realm that sword cultivators pursued in their lives. It was not some kind of cultivation method or sword skill, but a state of mind that led to the ultimate sword path. This state of mind was extremely difficult to reach. Not to mention others, no one in Donglin County had reached this realm. Only those spirit cultivators who specialized in sword path might have a few. Those who had this state of mind were all sword path experts, and more than 80% of them were Sky Origin Realm experts. Some people also said that spirit cultivators who could have the brilliant sword heart had almost paved the way to the Sky Origin Realm. Everyone present was a great expert in the realm of unity of heaven and man. They were all famous figures in Donglin County, but for those in the realm of unity of heaven and man, their greatest desire was naturally the Sky Origin Realm. Only by reaching the Sky Origin Realm could one truly stand in the forest of the strong and look down on all living things. In this falling star continent, one could walk freely. Therefore, when Huang Xiwan shouted the words Brilliant Sword Heart, everyone was so surprised. At the same time, there was some envy in their surprise. Leng Shiqi was already in the realm of unity of heaven and man at such a young age. This was already shocking enough. He had also comprehended the brilliant sword heart. In the future he had a great chance of breaking through to the Sky Origin Realm. At this moment, such a genius was standing in front of them, making everyone feel as if they had cultivated blindly for decades. Especially Chang Fengyu of the Mountain Sea sect, Tang Haoquang, and Huang Xiwan of the Tang family. They were the three most promising people to break through to the Sky Origin Realm. Now that they saw Leng Shiqi was abnormally outstanding, their expressions became even more complicated. Moreover, no one questioned because Huang Xiwan, the sect leader of the Shiju sect, had also cultivated sword path. The brilliant sword heart was also the realm he wanted to reach, so it was impossible for him to be wrong. Leng Shiqi had shocked many experts before he even used his sword. In fact, he had obtained the brilliant sword heart a long time ago, but only recently did he know the power of the brilliant sword heart. A few years ago, when he was still on the Blood Mist Island, he had drawn the brilliant sword heart. However, at that time he didn't feel anything and had long forgotten about it. Until recently, when Leng Shiqi practiced the Thousand Illusion Sword Codex, he did not use his unlimited skill points, but he realized that his sword skills were progressing very quickly. At first, he thought it was because the Thousand Illusionary Sword Codex was related to illusions. However, he decided to disguise himself as a disciple of the Wave Island Sword Monarch and began to cultivate the sword techniques left behind by him. Gradually, Leng Shiqi realized that every time he practiced sword skills, he would enter a mysterious state. It was in this state that he could comprehend sword skills so quickly. At that time he suddenly remembered the enlightened sword heart. The strange thing was that he vaguely remembered that the brilliant sword heart was only a beginner prize. It shouldn't have such a strong effect. Later on he thought about it again. Perhaps the brilliant sword heart was also a kind of talent that would only reveal itself when one came into contact with this field. Now that he was the disciple of the Wave Island Sword Monarch, he had to show off his sword skills. Since the enlightened sword heart had merged with Leng Shiqi, he naturally entered this state when he attacked. At this moment, the expression on Tang Haoqing's face turned ugly. Clearly he was the one fighting with Leng Shiqi. Now the fight hadn't even started yet, and Leng Shiqi had stolen all the limelight. However, he could also feel the pressure that Leng Shiqi was exerting on him. Leng Shiqi held his sword and did not make a move, but Tang Haoqing felt as if he was in a forest of swords, as if there were countless swords hidden everywhere. Tang Haoqing did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. His entire body was bathed in flames, and an incomparably thick broadsword appeared in his hand. The raging flames that filled the sky suddenly shrank, gradually turning into a dark red color, making him look a little demonic. Tang Haoquang, the patriarch of the Tang family, frowned. He's going all out. Dark red flames lingered on the huge broadsword. As Tang Haoqing slashed, a scorching and murderous aura suddenly soared into the sky. The broadsword light was tens of thousands of feet long. Leng Shiqi was still chuckling. He turned his long sword, and in an instant, everyone heard the sound of turbulent waves and even smelled a trace of the sea breeze. It was as if they had arrived on the boundless sea in the blink of an eye. The raging flames around Tang Haoqing were instantly suppressed to the extreme, and the sky-tearing broadsword light shrank by half. Leng Shiqi still did not attack, but he easily suppressed Tang Haoqing with his every move. This kind of strength inevitably made others secretly shocked. Huang Xiuan, the leader of the 10 Absolutes, murmured, That can't be sword intent forming a field, right? At this moment, Leng Shiqi finally attacked. With a point of his sword, raging waves surged into the sky, and strange phenomena appeared. There seemed to be an island looming in the raging waves, full of strangeness. Under the suppression of the raging waves, Tang Haoqing's broadsword light was on the verge of collapse. Tang Haoqing knew that things were not good. Immediately, he roared, and the heavenly fire descended and condensed into a broadsword. In an instant he slashed down and tore the sword river apart. Leng Shiqi's spiritual sword slashed down, and countless sword chi suddenly burst out. The sword chi were violent, soft, majestic and sinister. The countless sword chi were accompanied by completely different sword styles. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth within 100 miles, regardless of the elemental attributes, became the same type, and that was sword. Not only that, the sword chi everywhere intertwined, densely covering the sky and the sun, with endless killing intent strangling Tang Haoqing. Such a terrifying attack not only gave Tang Haoqing a fright, but even the many experts who were watching the battle were slightly stunned. The number of sword chi did not mean much and everyone present could do it. However, the sword chi was all-encompassing, which meant that Leng Shiqi had not only comprehended one or a few types of sword intent, but hundreds and thousands of them. Was he still human? Not to mention whether Tang Haoqing could block it, at least half of the experts were not confident that they could block this move. In addition, from the range and extent of Leng Shiqi's spiritual energy of heaven and earth, he was clearly at the intermediate stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. Originally, they thought that Leng Shiqi was already a monster for cultivating to the unity of heaven and man realm in his 20s. Now, it looked like he had just broken through, and he was already at the intermediate stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. Where did such a freak come from? At the same time, everyone already knew the result of the battle in their hearts. They also felt sorry for Tang Haoqing, who asked him to meet such a monster. Tang Haoqing's heart was also in despair. He had comprehended the fire attribute spiritual energy of heaven and earth, but under Leng Shiqi's sword domain, he could not display his true strength at all. Facing this monstrous sword chi, he was even more powerless to resist and could only shout, "I admit defeat." Hearing this, Leng Shiqi also stopped, but he seemed to be half a beat slower. Hundreds of sword qi still tore through Tang Haoqing's protective flame. The sword qi entered his body, instantly causing Tang Haoqing to be bathed in blood. At the same time, his face showed a painful expression, as if he was experiencing the world's torture. In fact, this was indeed the case. Since Leng Shiqi became one of the 4 chiefs, he had received a huge amount of spiritual skill resources, and he had cultivated a lot during his seclusion. He also felt that it was very complicated, so he used it in the form of sword qi. To be honest, even he himself did not know how many kinds of strange sword qi had entered Tang Haoqing's body. He looked at Tang Haoqing's painful appearance and sneered in his heart, but he said with an apologetic expression, "I am not very proficient in spiritual skill, so I did not stop for a moment. Please forgive me." Chapter 747. When Tang Haoqing heard Leng Shiqi's words, he was so angry that he couldn't help but spit out another mouthful of blood. He had already reached the unity of heaven and man realm and could control his own strength to the smallest detail. How could he not be able to hold back? This was clearly Leng Shiqi's intention. However, Leng Shiqi had spoken first and Tang Haoqing was not as skilled as him. If he continued to pester him, it would only be more embarrassing. Thus, he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and retreated into the crowd of the Tang family. The masters of the Tang family all looked at Leng Shiqi with unfriendly eyes. Tang Haoquang said coldly, "Tang Haoqing has already admitted defeat. Why are you still so heavy-handed? The Tang family doesn't care about other people's identities. We have nothing to fear." His words were aggressive, but in the ears of the others they were disdainful. They knew that Tang Haoquang thought that Leng Shiqi was young and inexperienced, so he wanted to scare him to save Tang Haoqing's face. Leng Shiqi scratched his head embarrassedly and said with an innocent smile, "I really didn't do it on purpose. I didn't expect this person to be so weak." When he said this, the people of the Tang family suddenly turned pale. The other masters were also stunned. Especially when they saw Leng Shiqi's bright smile and the sincere tone he used to say those words, he gave people the impression that he was an innocent young man. However, those words made Tang Haoqing feel a little embarrassed. In this way it made Leng Shiqi seem even more innocent. At this time Feng Luan came out to smooth things over. "Young friend Leng, it's obvious that you haven't fought often. You still lack combat experience. It's understandable that you made a mistake." Tang Haoquang secretly took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Since City Lord Feng has spoken, this matter will be put aside for now. However, the Tang family will ask for an explanation sooner or later." Leng Shiqi said resentfully, "I misspoke." The members of the Tang clan remained silent with a cold expression. Feng Luan then said, "Next up is sect leader Wu Huang of the 10 Absolutes against Lin Yun of the Mountain Sea sect." The battle between those in the unity of heaven and man realm had to continue. Leng Shiqi once again became a spectator, but his mind was no longer focused on other people's battles. Instead, he was refining the plan in his heart. The plan to destroy the Tang family. When he injured Tang Haoqing just now, he had already done something to Tang Haoqing's body. As long as he was within 1,000 feet of Tang Haoqing, he could take his life at any time. Leng Shiqi had never forgotten Tang Haoqing's punch back then. He also admitted that he was a vengeful person, so when he decided to appear in the world as Leng Shiqi, the Tang family had been completely included in the list of people who must be killed. However, since the world's first spirit cultivator conference was taking place, it was not good for him to use his own power to forcefully destroy the Tang family. Otherwise, not only would it cause chaos, it would also arouse all sorts of suspicions. Leng Shiqi was now very powerful, and it would be easy for them to destroy the Tang family. However, because of his high position, his every move would be suspected by many people. Therefore, he was prepared to secretly kill the Tang family's strongest in the unity of heaven and man realm. As long as the Tang family did not have these great experts, there would be many forces that wanted to replace the Tang family. At that time, there would be no need for Leng Shiqi to make a move. The Tang family would naturally walk the path of destruction. Tang Haoqing was only the first. Tang Haoquang and the rest, who were standing not far away, would never know that their Tang family was already standing at the edge of a bottomless abyss. After about 2 hours, the first round of the battle ended. The battle between those in the unity of heaven and man realm caused quite a commotion, but everyone was not fighting to the death. Moreover, they were more familiar with each other, so it did not take long for the results to be known. There was not much time left. After the first round there were only 16 people left. Among them, the Mountain Sea sect took up 5 people and still dominated one side. There were still 3 people from the 10 extremities, while the Tang family only had 2 people left. Among these 16 people, most of them were in the late stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. For example, Mountain Sea sects Chang Fingyu, 10 extremities Wu Huang Xiwan, and Tang Haoquang had even reached the peak of the unity of heaven and man realm. The second round was more difficult and exciting. Feng Luan stepped forward and said, "The second round will still be drawing lots. Everyone do not move." Then he shot out 16 rays of light like last time. This time, Leng Shiqi's opponent was actually Tang Haoquang. Leng Shiqi was also a little surprised. He did not secretly do anything. It was their bad luck to draw the Tang family one after another. However, Tang Haoqing secretly sneered, "After giving Feng Luan such a big benefit, you must eliminate Leng Shiqi to relieve the hatred in my heart." Tang Haoquang said angrily, "This person's identity is not simple. We can't really offend him. At most, we can make him a little embarrassed. Besides, even if I beat him, he still has a chance to fight for the last 2 spots. I don't care anymore. It's best to make him lose all face and face." Everyone did not have time to rest. They immediately started the second round of the battle. The strength of the opponents in the first few rounds was somewhat different, but there was not much suspense. The most interesting battle was the battle between Chang Fingyu and Huang Xiwan. One of them was an elder of a top sect, and the other was a first-rate sect leader. Their strength was about the same. Their battle showed the strength of the union of heaven and man realm. It was also the only battle that Leng Shiqi paid attention to. Chang Fingyu used the spiritual power of water and earth elements at the same time. The 2 elements that were originally incompatible with each other were mastered by him, and his power was immeasurable. Huang Xiwan was also an eccentric person. He had cultivated 2 types of weapons, the saber and the sword. Moreover, he had cultivated them to an extremely high level. He was also a veteran of the union of heaven and man realm. Back then, he comprehended the 5 ultimate saber techniques and the 5 ultimate sword techniques, which caused a sensation for a time. From then on, he led the 10 extremities Wu to become a first-rate force. Their battle could be said to be the most exciting and eye-catching of the day. At times, the mountains suppressed the world, and at other times the sword light soared into the sky. In the end, they even fought with real fire. Everyone hurriedly worked together to set up restrictions so that they did not make too much noise. Otherwise, the small mountain would have been razed to the ground. In the end, Huang Xiwan was slightly better and defeated Chang Fingyu. Leng Shiqi had also gained a little. He himself had also cultivated the saber, sword, and earth attribute cultivation techniques. From the exchange of blows between the 2 of them he could see some tricks. As long as he could comprehend them, his strength would improve again. Unfortunately, this kind of battle between experts at the peak of the union of heaven and man realm was too rare. After one battle, it was Leng Shiqi's turn until the last battle. However, everyone thought that there was no suspense in this battle. Not long ago, Leng Shiqi's strength was indeed very strong, but that was compared to the early and middle stages of the union of heaven and man realm. His opponent at this moment, Tang Haoquang, was also at the peak of the union of heaven and man realm. He was a powerful existence who had the chance to break through to the Tianyuan realm. Just based on the cultivation realm, he could crush Leng Shiqi. Tang Haoquang stretched out his hand to Leng Shiqi and said, "Please." Leng Shiqi showed his white teeth and smiled, "Please." Chapter 748. This is going to be a good show. A master of the Castellan mansion sent a voice transmission to Feng Luan. Leng Shiqi injured Tang Haoqing. It's reasonable that the Tang family wants to regain some face. But I don't know how much Tang Haoquang fears Leng Shiqi. That will determine how much strength he will use. Feng Luan said, "I've investigated this Leng Shiqi. He appeared out of nowhere. There was no trace of him before he showed up in Donglin town. There is a Tianyuan stage master named Longyu Sword King overseas, but he hasn't shown up for decades. So it's hard to say whether he is real or not. But it doesn't matter whether he is the descendant of Longyu Sword King or not. What matters is that a Tianyuan stage cultivator can't cultivate such a talent. So he must be backed by an extremely powerful force. With such a background, Tang Haoquang won't dare to use too much strength. Maybe he can force Leng Shiqi to use his moves. We can get the benefits without offending anyone. All we need to do is to watch the show." They all believed that Leng Shiqi would definitely lose. The others must have thought so too. In the field, Tang Haoquang also took out a spiritual sword. It was also a 5th-level spiritual sword. Everyone looked interested because Tang Haoquang did not practice sword skills. What he was best at was using his fists, palms, and fingers to gain a foothold in the world. But now he was using a sword, a 5th-level spiritual sword. It was obvious that he was targeting Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi was obviously a sword cultivator the last time he fought, but Tang Haoquang wanted to use a sword skill that he wasn't good at to fight against Leng Shiqi, who was a sword cultivator. He only dared to do this because he thought that he was invincible due to his high cultivation level. I didn't expect clan leader Tang to be a sword cultivator. I'd like to learn from you. Leng Shiqi said innocently. I don't dare to learn from you. It's just that I haven't used my sword for a long time. I'm afraid I'm rusty. If I can't hold back, please forgive me. Tang Haoquang sneered. Leng Shiqi nodded seriously as if he didn't hear it. Tang Haoquang snorted inwardly, acting like a fool. Soon after, Tang Haoquang unsheathed his sword and a terrifying pressure descended. His sword move stirred up the void, and a 1,000-feet-long illusory sword shadow appeared out of thin air. Its boundless sharpness crashed down like Mount Tai. He wasn't a sword cultivator, but this power surpassed most sword cultivators. Even Huang Shiwan stopped looking like he was watching a show. Clearly, Tang Haoquang's swordsmanship had exceeded his expectations. Leng Shiqi cupped his hands in greeting, and in the next moment he slashed with his sword. In an instant, boundless sword aura surged like a raging wave, rolling to the east, wrapping in a majestic force to meet the attack. The void sword shadow and the furious wave sword river fiercely collided, and bursts of power exploded, shaking the heavens and earth. Even the overflowing spiritual energy caused the surroundings to become like a whirlpool that could devour everything at any time. Feng Luan immediately shouted, "Disperse!" Everyone reacted quickly and immediately retreated far away. At the same time, they formed seals to gather the overflowing terrifying power. After one move, the sword shadow and the sword river disappeared at the same time. They were evenly matched. Tang Haoquang's heart sank. He was a little surprised by Leng Shiqi's strength. He originally thought that Leng Shiqi would definitely be at a disadvantage under this move. However, Leng Shiqi took it. Not only did he take it, but he also didn't seem to have used his full strength. The gap between their cultivations was very big. Although the middle stage and the peak stage were only two small realms, the elemental spiritual energy that they could mobilize was indeed very different. However, from this point alone, Tang Haoquang had a complete victory. From this, it could be seen that Leng Shiqi's strength was definitely not just the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. The sword in Tang Haoquang's hand flashed with a sharp light. Amidst the roar of the dragon, the wind and clouds in the air surged, and in an instant, the sword aura split into thousands of rays. The rays of sword aura condensed into a huge dragon shadow that fell, as if it was going to swallow Leng Shiqi directly. Monstrous waves immediately surged around Leng Shiqi. What was different was that this huge wave was flashing with earthy yellow brilliance. At the same time, the earth elemental power between heaven and earth vibrated wildly. Bursts of heavy sword moves merged into the huge wave, and the sword waves rolled back and enveloped the dragon. At this time, the few people from the Mountain Sea sect widened their eyes slightly. They actually felt a familiar aura from Leng Shiqi's sword moves. That was the combination of water and earth elemental power. This was clearly something that the Mountain Sea sect was very proud of. At this moment, it was revealed in the hands of Leng Shiqi. Although he was only at the beginning, as long as he continued to comprehend it, he would not be weaker than the masters of the Mountain Sea sect. For a moment, they thought that Leng Shiqi had secretly cultivated their cultivation method, but on second thought that was not very likely. Chang Fengyu could only think that this was comprehended by Sword Monarch Longyu. After all, from the name, it was possible that Sword Monarch Longyu had cultivated both water and earth elemental sword moves at the same time, which just happened to be similar to the Mountain Sea sects. This time, Leng Shiqi's sword move had an additional heavy mountain sword move. It used the power of suppression, and he also secretly mixed in a few strands of earth elemental power. In an instant, Tang Haoquang's dragon sword aura began to gradually dissipate, and it was about to collapse. Tang Haoquang's face darkened. In the first move they were evenly matched, which made him feel a little embarrassed. If he lost this time he would lose a lot of face. I've underestimated you. Tang Haoquang's sword move suddenly changed, and the dragon shadow disintegrated on its own. In the blink of an eye, dark clouds covered the sky and rain poured down. Every drop of rain was a ray of sword aura. The sword aura that blotted out the sky instantly broke through the sword river, and directly attacked Leng Shiqi. The sword aura above Leng Shiqi's head rushed to the sky, and the endless sword aura seemed to freeze time. As the sword pierced out, an ethereal divine figure appeared in mid-air, as if ascending to immortality. At a glance it was almost similar to Leng Shiqi. The long sword fell, and the shocking divine light and sword aura merged into one. The man and the sword became one, and the heaven and man became one. The space even began to tremble slightly. Leng Shiqi used the startling sword of the 16 heavens transformation truth as the foundation, and combined it with the 1,000 illusion sword technique and many other sword auras to create a powerful spiritual technique that surpassed the 7th level, Sword Saint. All of Tang Haoquang's golden light was instantly shattered, and his confidence was also completely destroyed. He was no longer thinking about how to suppress Leng Shiqi. Instead, he was thinking about how to block this sword immortal. Feng Luan and the other experts in the unity of heaven and man realm were all shocked. Although Leng Shiqi's sword was not targeted at them, the sharp sword aura made them feel a chill in their hearts. Was this really a sword aura that could be possessed by someone in the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm? Not to mention the middle stage, even someone in the late stage of the unity of heaven and man realm might not be able to do this. Otherwise, the situation would not be reversed so quickly, and Tang Haoquang would not be the passive party. Chapter 749. Today, ever since Leng Shiqi made his move, he had brought too many surprises to everyone. Now, it seemed that he even had the strength to fight against Tang Haoquang, who was at the peak of the unity of heaven and man realm. To be able to cultivate to the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm in his 20s and possess such terrifying combat power, could this person be the reincarnation of a powerful person? Tang Haoquang, who was facing the sword celestial, was more surprised than anyone else. But at this moment he did not care about being shocked. He threw away the long sword in his hand, and the divine light in his eyes suddenly burst out. A powerful pressure came. He pointed his finger and the space shook. This finger seemed to tear the sky apart. Although it looked like a simple finger, it had a boundless pressure that could crush everything. This was one of Tang Haoquang's unique skills, the sky-shattering finger. Under the sky-shattering finger, more than half of the sword celestial sword was immediately destroyed. However, the divine light behind Leng Shiqi's head shone brightly. A figure holding a sword suddenly appeared, and then merged with the sword celestial's shadow in the air. That was Leng Shiqi's divine soul. At this moment, Leng Shiqi's heaven, God, and man became one. In the heavens and earth, only the sword reigned supreme. The sword style that merged with the divine soul had transformed from a sword celestial to a sword god. In addition to the shocking sword intent in the world, a brilliant divine might appeared at this moment, causing people to unconsciously bow down and kowtow. No matter if it was a person or any power. The terrifying power of the sky-shattering finger that stirred the power of heaven and earth was compressed to the extreme under the divine power. Leng Shiqi's sword-style sword, and even a trace of heaven and earth's origin energy was faintly activated. As soon as the sword god appeared, the shocked expressions of many masters suddenly became a little more envious. They could all see that Leng Shiqi had the potential and foundation to break through to the heavenly origin stage. This was what they dreamed of. While Tang Haoquang was surprised, he also felt a huge pressure in his heart. He was facing a person who was 2 stages lower than him, but he was defeated again and again. This was unbelievable. What was even more unacceptable to Tang Haoquang was that from the moment he used the sky-shattering finger, it meant that he had lost. He did not intend to use his full strength from the beginning. Instead, he chose a sword technique that he was not very good at. He wanted to defeat Leng Shiqi with it. Thinking about how Leng Shiqi, a sword cultivator, was defeated by someone who wasn't a sword cultivator, it could be said that he had regained some face. Although Tang Haoquang was bullying the weak, it was still a result of drawing lots, wasn't it? However, when Tang Haoquang used the sky-shattering finger, it meant that he could not defeat Leng Shiqi with his sword skills alone. Therefore, even if he won, he would not be able to regain his dignity. When he faced the sword god's attack, he no longer thought about regaining his dignity. At this moment, he felt like he was facing a sky origin stage cultivator. He might lose. Tang Haoquang couldn't imagine it. If he lost to Leng Shiqi, not only him, but the entire Tang family would be humiliated. He would never allow such a thing to happen. Tang Haoquang stood there with rapt attention. His body did not move, but a power that could shake the heavens kept surging from his body. Feng Luan and the others were also surprised. Leng Shiqi actually forced Tang Haoquang to use the sky-shattering palm. Then Tang Haoquang clapped his palms and the world darkened. A heart-palpitating power was accumulated, but it was unstoppable. However, just as Tang Haoquang was about to make a big move, Leng Shiqi opened his mouth and shouted, "I admit defeat." He actually took the initiative to admit defeat, and in a flash he directly appeared near Feng Luan. Leng Shiqi had been in seclusion for a long time. The wave sword style and the two ultimate moves of Sword Fairy and Sword God had almost drained him of his understanding of the sword principle. Only the mesmerizing flower eyes had not been used. He could not use this move, otherwise his identity would be exposed. Moreover, Leng Shiqi had already gotten what he wanted. He could fight against the peak of the unity of heaven and man realm with the sword principle alone. Therefore he admitted defeat. Anyway, there were 2 places left to advance, and he was still confident that he could get one. In fact, it was not impossible for him to win against Tang Haoquang, as long as he secretly put the law of earth into the wave sword style. However, in his opinion there was no need for that. His performance today was shocking enough. If he defeated Tang Haoquang it would be too shocking. It was not a good thing to be too sharp. Tang Haoquang suddenly felt a stifling feeling in his chest, which made him feel extremely uncomfortable. It was as if he had punched cotton with all his strength. He also wanted to fail to stop, but Leng Shiqi ran to Feng Luan's side in a flash, so it was impossible for him to make a move. Feng Luan immediately announced Tang Haoquang's victory. In this way, 8 out of the 10 places have been decided. The remaining 2 places will be decided in the arena. The 8 people who entered the second round can go to the arena first, and the 2 who win the most in the end will advance. The remaining 8 people looked at each other. The strongest among them should be the Mountain Sea sects Chang Fengyu and Leng Shiqi. In fact, it was true. After going through rounds of battles, the 2 of them also competed for the last 2 places. At this point, the competition of the oneness of heaven and man realm in Donglin County was completely over. Next, the 10 people would go to the imperial capital and compete with the masters from various states and counties. It would also be a good opportunity for them to make a name for themselves. Feng Luan stepped forward and said, "Congratulations to the 10 of you. This is your promotion token. As long as you arrive at the imperial capital within 2 months, you will receive it." As he spoke, he took out the stone tokens and distributed them to Leng Shiqi and the others. Then everyone exchanged greetings and dispersed. However, just as Leng Shiqi was about to leave, Chang Fengyu and the others from the Mountain Sea sect came over. "Brother Leng, please wait." Unconsciously, they had changed the way they addressed Leng Shiqi from young friend Leng to brother Leng. At first, even though Leng Shiqi's cultivation was in the oneness of heaven and man realm, and his potential and background were terrifying, he was still a junior in their eyes. However, after several battles today, Leng Shiqi's strength was close to the peak of the oneness of heaven and man realm. This kind of strength was enough to be ranked in the top few among the crowd, so they had to put away their previous attitude. "Elder Chang, if you have something to say, please say it," Leng Shiqi said politely. Chang Fengyu smiled. "Actually, it's nothing. I just want to ask if your master sword principle is related to the power of water and earth." "Brother Leng, don't worry. We just felt a little familiar in your sword style. It is somewhat similar to the cultivation method of our Mountain Sea sect, so we just want to discuss it." When Chang Fengyu and Huang Xiwan were fighting, Leng Shiqi had some enlightenment and then naturally used it. "Elder Chang, are you suspecting that I have secretly learned the cultivation method of your sect?" Leng Shiqi immediately said with a displeased expression. "Of course not. Brother Leng, please don't misunderstand." Then Leng Shiqi first showed a hesitant expression, and then seemed to have made up his mind before saying, "Master has never allowed me to reveal this to outsiders. Since Elder Chang has asked, I will not hide it. In fact, Master did not teach me any earth-type sword style. I was inspired when I was watching the battle between Elder Chang and sect leader Huang Xiwan, so I decided to integrate the earth-type sword intent into the original wave sword style." "Impossible." Chang Fengyu immediately shook his head and said, "The cultivation method of our Mountain Sea sect is an 8th-level cultivation method. How can you learn it just by watching others fight?" Leng Shiqi showed a strange and puzzled expression. He scratched his head and said, "Is it difficult? I learned it just by watching." Chapter 750. When Chang Fengyu and the others heard this, they almost fainted. What did he mean by just looking at it? The cultivation method that they were so proud of was so simple in Leng Shiqi's eyes? Was this even human words? If someone else said this in front of them, Chang Fengyu and the others would probably cut them into pieces. However, Leng Shiqi's words made them somewhat believe him. He was only in his 20s, but he was already in the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. His own strength was close to the peak of the unity of heaven and man realm. Such a person's cultivation talent and comprehension were both abnormal. It was not impossible for him to comprehend something after just looking at it once. Chang Fengyu could only cup his fists and say, I didn't expect Brother Leng's comprehension to be so superb. I'm so envious. We have to go back to the sect first. I don't know if Brother Leng is interested in going to the Mountain Sea sect for a chat. Leng Shiqi sneered in his heart. If he really went to the Mountain Sea sect, it would not be as easy to fool them as it was now. He immediately declined. In that case, let's meet in the imperial capital. Goodbye. Chang Fengyu finished speaking and left with the people from the Mountain Sea sect. Leng Shiqi turned into a phantom and left the place. At the same time he opened his supercilious eyes. After there were no other auras within 100 miles, his figure disappeared in a tricolored light. At this time in Donglin City, the competition between the Spirit Aperture Realm cultivators had also come to an end. In the end, there were 10 people who obtained the opportunity to go to the imperial capital. Tang Wanqiu of the Tang family was one of them. After the competition ended, Tang Wanqiu dragged her injured and exhausted body back to her residence. It was reasonable to say that it was already a great honor for her to be in the top 10. If it were any other family or sect, they would have already started to celebrate. However, in the Tang family, there was not a single person who welcomed her. It was as if this was what she should have done. However, Tang Wanqiu was already used to it. A spirit cultivator family was not a sect. As long as there was a genius disciple, it was possible to rise up. In a spirit cultivator family, bloodline and seniority were the most important. Tang Wanqiu, as the daughter of a concubine, was destined from birth to be a tool of the Tang family. When she returned to her room, she endured the pain and applied medicine on herself. There was no extra resentment on her face, only determination. But in reality, her hatred for the Tang family had already surpassed ordinary enmity. She gave up on running away and resisting because this first Spirit Cultivator Conference was also an excellent opportunity for her. This was a good opportunity for him to make a name for himself and no longer be controlled by the Tang family. She had to seize this opportunity. Looks like you need some help. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded beside her ear, as if it was right next to her. Tang Wanqiu was shocked. She immediately unsheathed her sword, but a cold wind suddenly blew in the room, making her feel cold all over. Then a young man in black appeared in front of her like a ghost. This person was Leng Shiqi. You are. Tang Wanqiu quickly calmed down. She looked at Leng Shiqi's face and found it familiar. It wasn't that Tang Wanqiu recalled the incident in the illusory spirit's secret realm, but the news of a young Union of Heaven realm expert appearing in the city had spread out recently. On the day of Leng Shiqi's registration, Tang Wanqiu had also seen him from afar. I'm Leng Shiqi. You should have heard of me. Hearing Leng Shiqi directly admit it, Tang Wanqiu was surprised and said, It's really you, the Union of Heaven realm expert. Don't make such a fuss. I'm here to make a deal with you. Leng Shiqi had already placed 8 ghost slaves in the room. Everything that happened here would not be known by others. A deal? Tang Wanqiu's eyes were filled with doubt, and then she was full of vigilance. We don't seem to have anything to do with each other. Besides, our cultivation levels are too different. I should call you senior. What can we make a deal with? Her words were full of disbelief. Leng Shiqi nodded secretly. When he first met Tang Wanqiu at the Golden Wing Academy, he felt that she was somewhat shrewd and calm. He said, You were able to enter the top 10 of Donglin County today not only because of your strength, but also because of the mysterious power hidden in your body. Without that power, with your cultivation at the middle stage of the Spirit Aperture Realm, it would be impossible for you to get a place to go to the imperial capital. Am I right? Tang Wanqiu's heart trembled as if her secret had been seen through. I don't understand what you're talking about. Leng Shiqi shook his head. There's nothing to hide. Who doesn't have a trump card? Besides, anyone with a bit of insight can see through your tricks. However, if you want to stand out in the imperial capital, it's far from enough. You should be very clear about this. The content of our deal is very simple. I can help you break through to the late stage of the Spirit Aperture Realm quickly, and you just need to tell me how many Union of Heaven realm experts there are in the Tang family and where they are. After Tang Wanxiu heard the benefits offered by Leng Shiqi, she was tempted. No one would have any resistance to cultivation. And as Leng Shiqi said, it was already her limit to enter the top 10 of Donglin County. It would be too difficult for her to get a place in the imperial capital. Therefore, cultivation was too attractive for Tang Wanxiu. However, after she heard Leng Shiqi's conditions, she suddenly became vigilant. As a first-class force, the Tang family had Union of Heaven Realm experts as their strongest support. The specific number was a secret, and it could also be said that it was a trump card. Most sects and forces did not show their full strength to others. They would more or less hide a part of their strength. For example, Elder Gu and Elder Mu in the Blood Garment Pavilion were hidden, and outsiders did not know. Now, Leng Shiqi wanted to know the number of Union of Heaven Realm experts in the Tang family. What did he want to do? What Leng Shiqi wanted to do was, of course, to destroy the Tang family. His purpose was to kill all the Union of Heaven Realm experts in the Tang family. However, just in case, it was better to get the most accurate information first. In addition, he also wanted to use this opportunity to win over Tang Wanxiu. Tang Wanxiu's talent and strength were nothing in Leng Shiqi's eyes. She did not even meet the requirements to be recruited into the underworld. However, it was very likely that she had Meng Tianzong's power, so Leng Shiqi wanted to use Tang Wanxiu to study Meng Tianzong's purpose. He smiled and said, "Miss Tang, what are you worried about? Do you think I will harm the Tang family? Isn't this what you want to see? I can help you do what you want to do the most and destroy the Tang family." As Leng Shiqi spoke, a 9-colored light flashed in his eyes. Unknowingly, Tang Wanxiu's hatred for the Tang family was aroused. Her eyes were instantly bloodshot, revealing a terrible hatred. Chapter 751. Leng Shiqi's ghostly voice went directly into Tang Wanxiu's mind. "Do you hate the Tang family?" The hatred in Tang Wanxiu's eyes increased sharply, and she said without hesitation, "Yes." "Very well, it seems that our deal is done." "No," Tang Wanxiu suddenly said. She didn't let Leng Shiqi completely take over her mind. This was also the manifestation of Leng Shiqi's new attainments in illusion. She wouldn't even know that she was in an illusion. Tang Wanxiu said seriously, "I don't care if you have the ability to destroy the Tang family. I don't care either, but I must save my mother's life. Don't worry, I only want to kill the masters of the Tang family. As for the others, they don't deserve my attention. You can arrange for your mother in advance so that she won't be implicated. This is what I promised you." Leng Shiqi took out a thumb-sized jade as he spoke. "This is a spiritual jade, a product of pure spiritual power. After you refine it, it will be enough for you to cultivate to the 8th level of the spirit aperture realm without any future troubles." Tang Wanxiu's face showed a trace of hesitation, but she immediately took the spiritual jade. Then she wrote down a note with the information of all the masters of the Tang family in the oneness of heaven and men realm. At this time she couldn't help but ask, "Can you really destroy the Tang family? No matter how strong you are only in the oneness of heaven and men realm." "Miss Tang, you don't have to worry about that. The information I obtained from you can also be bought from Wind Whispering Tower. The reason why I chose to trade with Miss Tang is because I can't stand the Tang family's attitude and actions towards you." Tang Wanxiu had a very funny feeling in her heart. As a member of the Tang family, she had never been cared for by her own family. Now she was cared for by an outsider, and by a person who wanted to destroy the Tang family. Even though this kind of concern might be fake, or perhaps she was just pretending to be polite, or perhaps she was just using her, it still showed that she was truly disheartened by the Tang family. Seeing that the deal was made, Leng Shiqi didn't hesitate. "Miss Tang will definitely not regret today's choice. I will take my leave." 2 days later, the Tang family was celebrating. After the preliminary selection in Donglin County, more than a dozen people from the Tang family from the Unity of Heaven and Man stage to the Spirit Transformation stage had made it to the second round. In Donglin County, it was only second to the Mountain Sea sect. It was indeed worth celebrating. At this moment of celebration, Tang Wanxiu left after showing her face, but no one paid much attention to her. Tang Wanxiu used this opportunity to quietly send her mother out of the Tang family. Although she didn't think that Leng Shiqi could really destroy the Tang family, she still had some hope in her heart. Even if they couldn't destroy the Tang family, it would still be good if they could make the Tang family face huge trouble. The next day, the Tang clan patriarch Tang Haoquang, led all the victorious Tang clan disciples and set off for the imperial city. Little did they know that once they left they would never be able to return. Seeing that Tang Haoquang and the others were 100 miles away, Leng Shiqi appeared in the Tang family's territory like a ghost. When he opened his supercilious eye, he instantly discovered the auras of 3 Unity of Heaven and Man stage experts. These 3 people had participated in the World First Spiritual Cultivator Conference and were eliminated. Tang Haoqing was one of them. However, according to the information that Tang Wanqiu had given him, the Tang family didn't only have these few Unity of Heaven and Man stage experts. In addition, there were 2 late-stage Unity of Heaven and Man stage experts hiding. This could be said to be the Tang family's strongest trump card. Logically speaking, Tang Wanqiu shouldn't have known about it. However, after her cultivation began to advance by leaps and bounds a few years ago, the Tang family didn't understand the situation, so they asked the 2 elders to see what was going on. Only then did Tang Wanqiu learn about this matter. The 2 experts had been hiding in the Tang family's ancestral hall. The ancestral hall was covered with arrays. Even Leng Shiqi's supercilious eye couldn't see through it. With Leng Shiqi's strength, he wasn't afraid of 2 more late-stage Unity of Heaven and Man stage experts. However, he didn't have the ability to kill everyone in the Tang family alone. Moreover, he couldn't expose his true identity, so he had to fight a prepared battle. At this moment, Tang Haoqing was still drinking and chatting happily with the other 2 elders of the Unity of Heaven and Man stage. In this World First Spiritual Cultivator Conference, their Tang family could be considered to have made a lot of headlines. Other than Leng Shiqi, who had appeared out of nowhere, everything else was joyous. Tang Haoqing heroically drank a large bowl of wine and said excitedly, "In my opinion, the patriarch will definitely be ranked on the Flying Dragon list. At that time, who in the world doesn't know about our Tang family?" Ah, that's right. The patriarch's strength is unfathomable. He has never used his full strength. Let the people of the other provinces see the strength of our Tang family. Come, drink. Tang Haoqing poured a full bowl of wine and put it to his mouth. Just as he was about to drink it, his eyes suddenly widened and his face quickly turned red. Then, with a bang, Tang Haoqing exploded into a cloud of blood mist. The other 2 elders were stunned. What was going on? In the next moment, they turned pale with fright. As if they were facing a great enemy, they shouted, "Who dares to behave so atrociously in the Tang family?" "The person who will kill you." A voice descended from the 9 heavens. The 2 elders looked up at the same time and saw a figure bathed in resplendent starlight slowly descending from the sky. Stars swirled around that person's body like a dazzling armor, looking mysterious and profound. This was the 7th level spiritual technique that came with the Heavenly Cycle Star God technique after Leng Shiqi broke through to the Unity of Heaven and Man stage, the Star God armor. This was a powerful spiritual technique that combined amplification and defense. When it was used, Leng Shiqi's cultivation directly reached the late stage of the Unity of Heaven and Man stage. He opened his hand and the stellar glint circulated, setting up a starry sky barrier. All the elemental spiritual energy in the Tang family's territory was isolated. The 2 elders of the Tang family were about to mobilize the elemental spiritual energy of heaven and earth to defend against the enemy, but at this time, they suddenly found that they could not sense any elemental spiritual energy. In the sky it was daytime, but in the blink of an eye, it turned into a starry sky, and those countless stars seemed to be slowly growing larger. No, it wasn't enlarging. Instead, it was an endless stream of stars descending upon them. Stars falling down, destroying heaven and earth. The 2 elders of the Tang family could not mobilize the elemental spiritual energy of heaven and earth, so they were only a little stronger than those in the Gang spirit realm. They could hardly resist such an attack. They could only forcibly burn their essence and blood to try to escape, but the stars seemed to lock onto them. No matter how they moved, they could not escape the fate of being penetrated by thousands of stars. 2 great masters in the Unity of Heaven and Man stage were killed in a face-to-face encounter. At the same time, the whole Tang family was suddenly filled with panicked voices. A large number of Tang family disciples were frantically fleeing outside. Leng Shiqi did not pay attention to those people because he was waiting for 2 people. As expected, 2 streaks of flowing light rushed out of the ancestral hall of the Tang family. Some Tang family members thought that their savior had come, but the 2 streaks of flowing light fled at an incredible speed. Chapter 752. The 2 streaks of light were the Tang family's hidden Unity of Heaven and Man experts. They were both in the late stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. Now that the Tang family was facing a crisis, they should have descended like gods of war to save the Tang family. That was the meaning of their existence. However, they did not care about the lives of the Tang family disciples and fled without looking back. What a joke. Tang Haoqing and the other two were at the unity of heaven and man realm. If they died without a sound, the attacker must be at the sky origin realm. Wouldn't it be suicide for them to fight against the sky origin realm expert? They might as well take the opportunity to escape. As long as they were still alive and met up with Tang Haoquang, they would have a chance to survive. If they were still alive, the Tang family would not be destroyed. At worst, they could just build another Tang family. In the end, their own lives were more important. Lung Shiqi, who was in midair, smiled with interest. It's a good thing that I got the information in advance. Otherwise they might have escaped. Since he knew that the Tang family had two unity of heaven and man realm experts, why did he barge in without any preparation? The 1,000 illusion sword in Lung Shiqi's hand flashed. Immediately, sword threads as thin as hair suddenly surged out from the ground of the heavenly mountain. Every single one of those sword threads carried a terrifyingly sharp sword intent. As they shot out, they pierced through the air and intertwined with each other to form a sword formation. The two streaks of light collided with the sword threads. One of them slapped out with his palms and a heaven-shaking palm shadow fell. It was one of the Tang family's ultimate techniques, the heaven-shaking palm. The other person pointed out a finger. The space trembled and a terrifying finger force exploded the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. This was the heaven-shattering finger that Lung Shiqi had seen before. When the two ultimate techniques were used, the mountain behind the Tang family began to show signs of collapsing. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth formed a frightening storm. The two originally thought that they had a chance to rush out of the sword array, but suddenly, a mysterious force pressed down on them like Mount Tai. The two of them were instantly pressed down several hundred feet into the ground. Whatever heaven-shaking palm or heaven-shattering finger, they were all destroyed. Lung Shiqi gestured with one hand and the 1,000 illusion Dao sword appeared in his hand. The 1,000 illusion Dao sword lit up with specks of starlight, making it even more dazzling. Immediately, the power of the stars in the sky transformed into streaks of sword light that rained down like a meteor shower. The two Unity of Heaven realm experts were unable to move under the suppression of the gravitational space. Seeing that they were about to perish, they were extremely unwilling. They still didn't know who did it because Lung Shiqi was wearing the Star God battle armor. They couldn't see his face and they couldn't sense his aura. They didn't understand who the Tang family had offended and why they would encounter such a terrifying enemy and suffer such a calamity. One of them was bathed in blood, and he transmitted his voice with great difficulty. Quickly send a message to the Patriarch and the others. Quickly hide. Following which, the man's body began to swell rapidly and self-destruct. However, the power of his self-destruction was not used to counterattack. Instead, it formed layers of waves that blocked in front of the other person. He was using his life to buy a sliver of time. The other person took the opportunity to take out a jade plate and spat out a mouthful of blood essence that condensed into a line of words that entered the jade plate. Just as he finished his actions, the boundless starry sword light had already attacked, and not even his bones were left. Lung Shiqi stood in the air, using the anti-gravity force to easily fly. This was also a small trick he used to pretend that he was a Sky Origin stage expert. Although it was a small trick, from the beginning he gave off a sense of invincibility. Otherwise, these two late-stage experts of the Unity of Heaven realm would not have been so easy to kill. With a light hook of his finger, their mustard seed bracelets flew into his hand. Lung Shiqi looked down at the Tang family below. Currently, more than half of the Tang family had been destroyed, and the disciples inside had either died or fled. Although he did not target the other spirit cultivators when he attacked, the power that was unintentionally leaked out was a nightmare for those spirit cultivators. The Tang family was clearly immersed in the atmosphere of celebration a moment ago, but in the next moment, they were greeted with a disaster, and it was a disaster that was inexplicable. Lung Shiqi's attack this time was equivalent to eliminating more than half of the Tang family's strength. The Tang family, which was once a huge monster to him, had unknowingly become so weak. Or rather, it was not that the Tang family was weak, but that Lung Shiqi was too strong. Of course, Lung Shiqi did not have time to sigh here. He had already completed most of the purpose of his trip. Next, he only needed to deal with Tang Haoquang and the others, and the Tang family would be left to fend for themselves. Immediately, he opened the system map and instantly locked onto Tang Haoquang's position. At this moment, in a remote area at the foot of the Tang family's mountain, A beautiful figure was looking at Leng Shiqi with a complicated expression in her eyes. Most of them were shock and disbelief, but there was also a trace of joy. As for the Tang family, who was hundreds of miles away, they still did not know what had happened. Because there were a few low-level spirit cultivator among them, their speed was not very fast, and they planned to stay in the mountains for the night. To them, they could easily build a small house, and with Tang Haoquang here, they did not have to worry about their safety. They could just treat it as a trip. At this moment, Tang Haoquang had settled everyone down and was about to meditate when a round jade pendant hanging on his waist shattered. Tang Haoquang was shocked. This jade pendant was only used when the Tang family was in great danger. However, they had just left the clan grounds and had not gone too far. What could have happened to the Tang family? The others also walked over nervously, wanting to see what had happened. Tang Haoquang waved his hand and said, "Everyone rest. I don't think it's a big deal." As the clan leader, he was the best at comforting people. Then, with his back facing everyone, he formed a seal. The jade pendant flashed with traces of blood light and formed a few words. "The Sky Origin Realm is coming, the clan grounds are destroyed, run. Run. Run." Seeing this line of words, Tang Haoquang was stunned. He did not dare to believe what he was seeing. When did their Tang family offend a Sky Origin Realm expert? The clan grounds were destroyed, which meant that the 5 Unity of Heaven Origin Realm experts in the Tang family had all fallen. Especially the last 3 words, "run," which made Tang Haoquang's heart tremble with fear. Tang Haoquang's strange behavior was naturally seen by everyone. Everyone's heart thumped. Could something have happened to the clan grounds? Clan leader, what happened? There are many experts in the clan grounds. Nothing should happen. Leader, please tell us. We are really worried. Suddenly, a resplendent figure stood in the air. A sharp killing intent enveloped everyone. He said in a voice that made people feel cold, "Don't worry, you will meet soon." Chapter 753. Who is it? Tang Haoquang jumped up at once. How could someone get close to him when he was so close to him? However, when he saw the figure flying in the sky like a star god descending, his heart sank to the bottom of the valley. Sky Origin Stage Cultivator. Is there really a Sky Origin Stage Cultivator attacking the Tang clan? Tang Haoquang was shocked. He thought he was an experienced man. He had never messed with a Sky Origin Stage Cultivator. How could such a disaster happen? What on earth was going on? The others were in despair. The Sky Origin Stage Cultivator who suddenly showed up with a murderous intent was definitely not here to reason with them. Tang Haoquang was shocked and confused at the same time. He had just received the news from the clan. How could someone find them in such a short time and come here in such a short time? Was there more than one Sky Origin Stage Cultivator attacking the Tang clan? Tang Haoquang shouted in his mind. How could the Tang clan be attacked by 2 Sky Origin Stage Cultivators? He couldn't help but ask, "Master, may I know what we have done to offend you? Why are you doing this?" Leng Shiqi answered in an old voice, "Cause and effect. It is time for you to pay for what you have done." Tang Haoquang was even more confused. However, Leng Shiqi didn't want to waste any more time on them. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, he made up his mind and 2 more arms grew out from his back. At the same time, all kinds of spiritual power gathered together and exploded his spiritual power. It was like a giant whirlpool. Things had come to this point. The only thing Tang Haoquang could do was to fight. He pointed out the sky-breaking finger, piercing through the air. The sky-shaking palm went against the natural order. Tang Haoquang stomped on the sky again as if he was going to step on the sky. The sky-breaking finger, the sky-shaking palm, and the sky-trampling kick were the 3 most powerful skills of the Tang clan. Tang Haoquang was using all 3 skills at the same time. The 3 different kinds of power were swirling together. Vaguely, Tang Haoquang had triggered a slight trace of the natural order. Leng Shiqi was shocked. Tang Haoquang seemed to have touched the edge of the Sky Origin stage. Maybe he could break through in a few years. What a pity. Leng Shiqi's 4 arms formed a seal. In an instant, the cries of the fire phoenix incinerated the sky and destroyed the world. The roar of the water dragon devoured everything. The roar of the wind tiger shook heaven and earth. The descent of the black tortoise suppressed everything. The innate 4 phases filled the world like a Dharma idol. This posture alone made Tang Haoquang and the others horrified. Even the spirit cultivators below the spirit astral realm were directly shocked to death by the terrifying spiritual pressure. Lung Shiqi brought his 4 arms together, and the power of the 4 elements suddenly fused together to form an array diagram that connected the heavens and the earth. Strands of the power of laws that reached the source of origin spread out, and Tang Haoquang's fists, palms, and legs disappeared in an instant. 4 spirits diagram. At first, Tang Haoquang thought he was facing a sky origin stage cultivator. He didn't expect to win. He just wanted to try his best to buy some time for the others to escape. Even if their chances of escaping were extremely slim, they still had to fight for it. However, when the 4 spirits diagram came out, the area within a radius of hundreds of miles was as terrible as the end of the world. There was no place for them to escape. As the patriarch of a first-class force, Tang Haoquang had seen some great storms, but at this moment he couldn't help but feel desperate. In front of this absolute power, he who was at the peak of the oneness of heaven and man realm, was still so small and fragile. But suddenly, his eyes widened as if he thought of something. He roared, "This is the 4 spirits diagram. You are Lu Xingji, the 4th director of the Dark Thunder Guards." He finally remembered that more than a year ago, a major event had happened in Pinghui Prefecture, which was the destruction of the top sect, the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. In that battle, Lung Shiqi shone brightly. He defeated Wei Qiyan with the 4 spirits diagram. Since then, his relevant information had been grasped by the major forces, so Tang Haoquang finally recognized him. The 4 spirits diagram slowly descended, and the boundless violent power destroyed everything. Tang Haoquang's last consciousness died with his eyes wide open. He couldn't understand why the director of the Dark Thunder Guards wanted to deal with the Tang family. Unfortunately, he would never know that Lung Shiqi was the person who killed Tang and Pu of the Tang family back then. He was also the person who was almost killed by Tang Haoquang's punch. Lung Shiqi was right. All of this was karma. Rumble. The destructive power of the 4 spirits diagram descended. Tang Haoquang and the others, as well as the land within a radius of 50 miles, disappeared without a trace as if they had evaporated. As far as the eye could see, all that was left was a terrifying abyss. Lung Shiqi had already removed his star god armor. His face was a little pale. Using the 4 spirits diagram had consumed a lot of his energy. But at the same time, the 4 spirits diagram was much stronger than when he was in Pinghui Prefecture. Even a lion would use all its strength to hunt a rabbit. He didn't dare to be careless when facing Tang Haoquang, the leader of a first-rate force. He immediately used the 4 spirits diagram to kill him. At this point, Lung Shiqi could be considered to have settled one of his worries. After using the power of the earth to wipe away all traces, he directly returned to the imperial capital. Not long after, several figures arrived. These people were all in the unity of heaven and man realm, and most of them were people who had participated in the World First Spiritual Cultivator Conference. Chang Fengyu and Huang Xiwan were among them. Like Tang Haoquang, they also went back to celebrate before heading to the imperial capital. They weren't very far away. Just now, they had sensed the destructive power from 100 miles away, so they decided to come and check it out. Of course, they weren't that stupid. They waited until the commotion was over before rushing over. However, all they saw was a barren land. Other than that, there was nothing else. It was precisely because there was nothing that these people were very puzzled. There were clearly powerful experts fighting here, so how could there be no traces? Therefore, they quickly guessed that the traces of the battle had been wiped away by someone. They searched around but still didn't find anything. In the end, they could only leave with doubts. A few days later, they learned that the Tang family had suffered heavy casualties. They were actually killed by several hostile second-rate forces. From the beginning to the end, all of the Tang family's unity of heaven and man realm cultivators didn't show up. It was as if they had disappeared without a trace. In addition, they didn't find any traces of Tang Haoquang and the others in the past few days. At this time, Huang Xiwan and the others suddenly realized that the people who died in the battle that day might be Tang Haoquang and the others. While they were surprised, they couldn't help but sigh. The Tang family, a first-rate force that had been established in Donglin County for more than 100 years, was unexpectedly wiped out without a sound. Who was the one who did it? Since they could wipe out the Tang family, they could also wipe out Shiju Wu. They could also be a great threat to the Mountain Sea sect. At this moment, the Mountain Sea sect and Shiju Wu were also cautious. The entire Donglin County was once again in a state of panic. Chapter 754. Thunderblaze Dynasty, Imperial Palace. Lung Shiqi's soul avatar rubbed the space between his eyebrows helplessly. In front of him there was a small mountain of memorials. After all, the throne of the Thunderblaze dynasty had been vacant for nearly 2 years. Although there was the shoddy king, he was not someone who liked to review memorials. At that time, Crown Prince Lei Haoge was focused on causing trouble, so he had accumulated a lot. In addition, the world's first spirit cultivator conference was in full swing, and Leng Shiqi had almost arranged everything. But the problem was that there were also many spirit cultivators and major forces from the Starfall dynasty and Northern Wei dynasty who had come because of their fame. These people had to be watched closely. Thus, one thing after another was piled up in front of him. With the powerful cultivation of the soul avatar and the existence of his divine soul, logically speaking, he should not feel tired. However, at this moment he felt dizzy, as if his mental strength had been overused. Dealing with these state affairs was not something that could be done with a simple reply. He had to weigh the pros and cons and consider many factors. Especially since he had just ascended the throne, he did not know much about the style of many ministers and the situation of the various states and counties. He had to prepare many memorials before he could give an answer. The key was that this situation had been maintained for a few months. Even with the soul avatar's divine soul and powerful cultivation, he could not hold on any longer. Now that he thought about it, Lei Qingjun, who did not have any talent for cultivation, could sit in this position for decades. He could be said to be an extraordinary person. It was no wonder that Lei Qingjun, despite his young age and having countless treasures to enjoy, still passed away at such a young age. This throne was not something that ordinary people could sit on. Other than that, perhaps because the soul avatar's performance was very outstanding and he had a sense of propriety in handling matters, the 2 elders of the royal family were handling fewer and fewer matters. It was obvious that they were preparing to slowly give him all the power. At that time, there would be even more memorials to deal with. Thinking of this, the soul avatar couldn't help but frown even more. Who said that the emperor could summon the wind and rain, enjoy glory, splendor, wealth, and 3,000 beauties in the harem? As long as it was an emperor with a bit of ambition, they would not even have time to dote on their concubines. Speaking of which, some of these memorials advised him to take more concubines to enrich the harem. The original owner of this body, Lei Haoyin, only had 3 concubines. Ever since he ascended to the throne, he had been busy with state affairs and had not visited even once. Therefore, the harem was now an extremely desolate place. It wasn't that the soul avatar didn't like beautiful women. The key was that he wasn't Lei Haoyin. Although he had tried his best to adapt to Lei Haoyin's habits, no one could teach him that. Moreover, even though he and Lei Haoyin shared the same body, the soul avatar still felt a little strange. At this moment, the soul avatar sighed and picked up a memorial in front of him. When he saw the contents, he laughed inwardly. It turned out that the Dark Thunder Guard of Donglin County had sent the report. It was about how Leng Shiqi had killed the elites of the Tang family and destroyed their land. Later, he also wrote about the strange scene when Leng Shiqi killed Tang Haoquang, saying that it was worth investigating. This time, the soul avatar did not hesitate. He waved his hand and replied, "The deeper the conflict between the sects, the better." What he meant was that he did not want the Dark Thunder Guard to investigate. He did not want them to find any clues. "Your Majesty, you should rest." The old eunuch next to him brought him a cup of tea and said with concern. This was the person who had served Lei Haoyin when he was at his lowest. He should not have kept such a person around because he knew too much about Lei Haoyin's habits. Leng Shiqi's soul avatar kept him because he had been with Lei Haoyin for too long. Lei Haoyin had always treated his own people well, so it was not easy to do anything to him. Therefore, he used an illusion to change the eunuch's mind. The eunuch would think that the soul avatar's actions were normal. The soul avatar looked at him, picked up the teacup and took a sip. He did not speak because he saw someone coming through the door. "Ask Minister Mo to come in." The old eunuch bowed and walked to the door. He saw Prime Minister Mo Linhui coming. "Prime Minister Mo, His Majesty wants to see you." Mo Linhui's eyes flashed. "His Majesty knows I'm coming?" Inside the hall, Mo Linhui knelt and bowed. "This old subject greets His Majesty. May your Majesty live for 10,000 years. Minister Mo, please rise. Have a seat." After Mo Linhui sat down, the soul avatar asked, "What matter does Minister Mo have to report?" "Your Majesty." Mo Linhui straightened his body. "This old subject has 2 important matters to report to your Majesty. There is no harm in speaking. The first matter is about the 4 chiefs of the Dark Thunder Guard and the 4 punishment envoys of the Discipline Commission." Mo Linhui's face was solemn. Your Majesty, the Dark Thunder Guard and the Discipline Commission are very important to the Thunderblaze dynasty. There must not be people who sit on their meager contributions. Especially the 2 chiefs, the 4 chiefs and the 4 punishment envoys. They have been in charge of the Dark Thunder Guard and the Discipline Commission for many years. Each of them has a higher prestige than the last. If we continue to do this, I'm afraid that there will be people who will only recognize them and not your Majesty. The sole doppelganger immediately understood Mo Linhui's meaning. When he ascended the throne, he had already swapped out the Dark Thunder Guards and the Discipline Commission, but he had yet to move the Grand Commander, the 4 Great Stewards and the 4 Great Punishment Envoys. From the looks of it, Mo Linhui was ready to make his move. I understand what Minister Mo means, but right now, it is the first Spirit Cultivator Conference, and the Dark Thunder Guard and the Discipline Commission have contributed quite a bit. If we do this at this time, I'm afraid it won't be appropriate. Mo Linhui said, this old subject also has the same intention. The first Spirit Cultivator Conference in the world is the most important matter for the Thunderblaze dynasty. Currently, all the Spirit Cultivators are flocking to the Imperial capital, and it won't be long before it ends. This old subject feels that it's time to agree on a suitable candidate. Since Minister Mo has said this, I believe you already have a candidate in mind. The Soul Avatar chuckled. Mo Linhui's expression froze slightly. Your Majesty's foresight is like a god. This is the list that this old subject has drafted. Please take a look, Your Majesty. The old eunuch handed over the list. The Soul Avatar took a look and knew what Mo Linhui was planning. I will consider this matter carefully. Minister Mo said that there is another matter. I wonder what it is. The Soul Avatar changed the topic. Mo Linhui sighed first, then said in a deep voice, Your Majesty, as the Emperor, you are busy with state affairs all day long. This old subject is comforted and admires you. But then again, Your Majesty should also take responsibility for the continuation of the imperial family's bloodline. These words should not be said by this old subject, but all the reports about Your Majesty taking in concubines are like clay oxen entering the sea. This old subject dares to plead Your Majesty to take in more concubines and spread the branches of the Thunderblaze dynasty. Chapter 755. Spread the family? The soul clone was speechless. This matter was much bigger than he had imagined. But then again it made sense. Not to mention the imperial family, even ordinary clans valued the inheritance of their heirs very much. Now that he was the emperor, he didn't have a son. If something happened to him, wouldn't he have no one to inherit the throne? Although there were still many members of the imperial family in the Thunderblaze dynasty, it was inevitable that fierce internal strife would erupt and cause instability. This was definitely not something Mo Linhui and the other officials wanted to see. Thus, the matter of taking in concubines couldn't be delayed any longer. The soul clone didn't expect that he would be forced to take in concubines when he only wanted to be a proper emperor. It was truly difficult. However, the soul clone also understood that there would be various factions behind the concubines. Being chosen as a concubine by him, the new emperor, definitely wouldn't be low in status in the future. Then this concubine's family would become relatives of the imperial family and would naturally soar in status. From another perspective, the soul clone could also use this method to nurture some of his trusted officials. It was a win-win situation. Minister Mo's words are very true. This old official has also found a few women for Your Majesty. Your Majesty can summon them. After saying this, Mo Linhui took out a list of names. The soul clone smiled faintly and said, It seems Minister Mo came prepared. It is this old official's duty to solve Your Majesty's problems. Mo Linhui bowed deeply. The soul clone looked down and instantly saw a special name on the list. Moilo. He and Moilo could be said to have met once. When Leng Shichi first arrived in the imperial capital, he went to participate in the Celestial Treasures Enterprises auction. It was at that auction that he obtained the wondrous fish and water joy technique, which replenished all of his spiritual cavities. He also met his senior sister Sulwan. However, because of this, he inexplicably offended this Moilo. It was said that she was the woman with the best cultivation talent in the imperial capital. At the same time, her more important identity was Minister Mo's youngest daughter. The soul avatar cast a deep glance at Mo Linhui. This Mo Xianghua could be considered an elder of 3 dynasties. Now, he was only below one person and above tens of thousands of people. Yet he still wanted to be his father-in-law. Was he still not satisfied? Mo Lin Hui, on the other hand, looked straight into the eyes of the soul doppelganger, his entire body exuding a magnanimous aura. A thought flashed through the soul avatar's mind. He pondered for a moment and said, although the matter of me taking a concubine is my private matter, if we can use it, it might have a good effect. Mo Lin Hui's heart was as clear as a mirror. He knew that the emperor in front of him was very different from before he ascended the throne. He looked rough on the outside, but he was very careful on the inside. He said, Your Majesty must have other ideas. This old subject is all ears. I once said that other than the dragon ranking, I will also set up a phoenix dance ranking to list all the beauties in the world. Minister Mo, do you think this beauty on the phoenix dance list is qualified to become my concubine? The soul avatar first threw out a question. Mo Lin Hui stood there with rapt attention, and did not speak for a moment. The phoenix dance list was purely based on appearance, but if one wanted to become an imperial concubine, not only did they need to have a peerless appearance, they also needed to have a deep background, talent, or outstanding talent. No matter what, they had to have a few of these. Other than that, the most important thing was to have a clean background. To be able to be chosen to become an imperial concubine in the palace, the next few generations had to be investigated clearly. Not even the slightest bit of stain could be allowed. Therefore, Mo Lin Hui definitely did not agree with the soul avatar's words, but he did not refute it. Seeing Mo Lin Hui's silence, the soul avatar continued, The women that Minister Mo gave me are all daughters of courtiers. I believe that since these women can enter Minister Mo's eyes, there is naturally no problem. However, I also want to choose a few women from the Spirit Cultivator sect this time. After he finished speaking, Mo Lin Hui was shocked. Right now, the Thunder Flame Dynasty and the Spirit Cultivator sect were like fire and water. In other words, they wanted to take advantage of the first Spirit Cultivator assembly to ease the tension and break the relationship and trust between the sections. If there really were women from the Spirit Cultivator sect who entered the palace, if something went wrong, it would be terrible. However, when Mo Lin Hui thought about how His Majesty had first mentioned the Phoenix Dance list, he immediately understood the meaning of the soul avatar. His eyes lit up. This old subject understands. Your Majesty wants to use the name of selecting concubines to set up the Phoenix Dance list, and then choose a suitable candidate to enter the palace. In this way, the Spirit Cultivator sect and the imperial family will become in-laws, and the relationship will naturally ease. Not only that, my dear minister, you can think about it. Once a certain Spirit Cultivator sect marries me, how will they get along with the other powers? Gradually, this sect will only belong to the imperial family and become my vassal. This matter will be handed over to Minister Mo to handle. I believe in you. Mo Lin Hui shouted, Your Majesty is wise, and immediately received the order and left. At this time, Lung Shiqi had already returned to the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards. During this period of time, he had announced that he was in seclusion and did not allow anyone to disturb him, so no one knew that he had actually gone to Donglin County for a stroll. As the participants of the second round of the first Spirit Cultivator Conference arrived at the imperial capital one after another, Lung Shiqi finally came out of seclusion and began to take over everything. At this moment, Lung Shiqi was looking at a piece of information. The people inside were all on the list of those who had entered the second round, and there were only about 1,000 of them. In theory, the 36 provinces of the Thunderfire Dynasty had 40 spots, but there weren't many Sky Origin Stage experts competing for the Divine Dragon ranking. In fact, there weren't even 10 people from each province. Naturally, there were a few people who directly entered the second round. This wasn't because there were too few Sky Origin Stage experts in the Thunderfire Dynasty, but mainly because the Spirit Cultivator sect had barged into the Imperial Palace a while ago. They were afraid that the first Spirit Cultivator Conference was a trap set up for the Sky Origin Stage experts, so the Sky Origin Stage experts of the various sects didn't come. Of course, there was an exception, and that was the Hall Master of the Ultimate Saber Hall, Fu Yingxi. This person knew that there was a tiger in the mountain, but he still went to the mountain. However, in the eyes of the other sects, this was also good. At least there were people who went to investigate the background of the Thunderfire Dynasty. Other than him, most of the Sky Origin Stage experts who came to the Imperial Capital to participate in the first Spirit Cultivator Conference were actually rogue cultivators. There were also a few veteran experts who had been in seclusion for a long time. It seemed that being in seclusion couldn't hide their desire for fame. Perhaps the closer one's lifespan was to the end, the more some people cared about being famous for eternity. In addition, there were more than 10 experts from the Starfall dynasty, Northern Wei dynasty, and the 6 kingdoms of the western region. All the Sky Origin stage experts added up to less than 100 people. Of course, it was rare to be able to gather so many Sky Origin stage experts. Even if he could only look at them from afar, he would be satisfied with his life. Suddenly, the corner of Leng Shiqi's eyes twitched. He actually saw a familiar yet unfamiliar name at the end of the list: Western Desolate Province's rogue cultivator, Chu Hejing. Chapter 756. Seeing the name Chu Hejing, Leng Shiqi's eyes lit up. Chu Hejing was the master of his current identity. He was also his master in the Blood Robe Pavilion, Wuxia. When he was refining the Scarlet Gold Earth Dragon Flame in the Blood Cloth Pavilion, Ink Frost Ghost Man had hinted to him that Wuxiang might break through to the Sky Origin realm. If this Chu Hejing on the list was Wuxiang, then it meant that he had successfully broken through. To be honest, Leng Shiqi had some feelings for his master, Wuxiang. The two of them did not interact much, but Wuxiang had saved Leng Shiqi's life in the Southern God Peak. Just this point alone was enough to make Leng Shiqi feel grateful. Leng Shiqi was happy that Wuxiang could break through to the Sky Origin realm. Furthermore, Wuxiang's path was similar to Leng Shiqi's. They both learned a lot. Since Wuxiang had broken through to the Sky Origin realm, he could impart some experience to him. It could also be said that Leng Shiqi had been preparing for the Sky Origin realm since now. Ever since he broke through to the Unity of Heaven and Man realm, he had directly reached the middle stage. Furthermore, he had already grasped a trace of the laws of heaven and earth. It was easy for him to continue communicating with more elemental powers. Therefore, he did not have any bottlenecks in the Unity of Heaven and Man realm. As long as he had enough time, he could quickly cultivate to the peak of the Unity of Heaven and Man realm. He estimated that this process would take at least a few years. If it was someone else, it would be impossible to cultivate from the middle stage of the Unity of Heaven and Man realm to the peak in a few years. Even cultivating from the early stage of the Unity of Heaven and Man realm to the middle stage was not enough. In the Unity of Heaven and Man realm, it was no longer just about absorbing spirit energy. It was about comprehending the heaven and earth. This was a mysterious and profound process that took a long time to progress. It was impossible to achieve in one step. Fortunately, the lifespan of a cultivator in the Unity of Heaven and Man realm was extended by a lot. If others knew that Leng Shiqi could cultivate to the peak of the Unity of Heaven and Man realm in a few years, they would definitely not believe it. But in reality, not only could Leng Shiqi do it, he even felt that it was too slow. In the eyes of others, they would think that he was crazy. However, Leng Shiqi felt that a few years was too long. Don't forget that it had only been a few years since he left the Blood Mist Island. Who would have thought that he, who was only at the Spirit Transformation realm, would reach the middle stage of the Unity of Heaven realm? Not to mention that his peak battle strength was comparable to a Heavenly Origin realm cultivator. This kind of thing shouldn't have happened, but he had done it. Leng Shiqi also began to prepare some treasures that could help in communicating with the power of the elements. With his current status, he already had some ideas. As long as he had the help of the treasures of heaven and earth, his cultivation speed to the peak of oneness of heaven and man would only be faster. Therefore, it was time for him to prepare for breaking through to the Sky Origin stage. Everyone had a different way of breaking through to the Sky Origin stage because everyone had a different path. However, the experience passed down from generation to generation was valuable. For example, the Ink Frost Ghostly Man had given him the experience of breaking through from the experts of the Blood Garment Pavilion. However, compared to Wuxiang was definitely more suitable for him. After that, Leng Shiqi continued to look at the list of people who had come to the imperial capital. He also saw Tang Wanqiu's name. Now that the Tang clan had been destroyed, most of the Tang clan's members had been killed by their enemies. However, Tang Wanqiu had escaped in advance and left Donglin County at full speed. That was how she had escaped. She had simply come to the imperial capital to completely bid farewell to her past. In addition to her, Leng Shiqi also saw Black Flame Heavenly Sovereign's adopted daughter, Lian Yi. Lian Yi had been unexpectedly capable recently. She had been constantly accepting missions. Her ability and strength had improved by leaps and bounds. She was already at the late stage of the Spirit Aperture realm. This time, no one had opened the back door for her. She had relied on her own ability to obtain a spot. Leng Shiqi still had some expectations for her growth. On the list, there was also Bing Shang from the Blood Garment Pavilion who was worthy of his attention. According to the information, Bing Shang's cultivation was at the peak of the spirit aperture realm. It was very likely that she would make it to the Wandering Dragon list. In addition, there were also several people from the Blood Garment Pavilion. Although the Blood Garment Pavilion had tacitly agreed not to participate in such a grand event in the past, this time it was held by the Thunder Flame Dynasty. The Thunder Flame Dynasty had invited all the spirit cultivators in the world and had even sent invitations to all the major sections. The Blood Garment Pavilion was one of them, so the other forces had nothing to say. The world's first spirit cultivator assembly was also a good opportunity for the Blood Garment Pavilion to completely appear in front of everyone. As for Delta Origi, Yushu, and the others, they were still from the elite society. They were not on the list. This was because their cultivation was at the spirit astral realm, and Leng Shiqi had set up the Flying Dragon list to include the spirit astral realm and the oneness of heaven and man realm. This was very unfair to the spirit astral realm. They did not have the strength to fight against the oneness of heaven and man realm experts. At first, many spirit cultivators were dissatisfied and were shouting why the spirit astral realm was not listed separately. In fact, this was also deliberately done by Leng Shiqi. First of all, the spirit astral realm was a realm that was neither high nor low. Although it was considered an expert, it did not have much ruling power. More importantly, most of the members of the underworld Leng Shiqi were at the spirit astral realm. He did not want the people of the underworld to be exposed to the public. Leng Shiqi firmly believed that all the members of the underworld were favored by the heavens. In addition, he had obtained the inheritance of the underworld. He was not boasting. If the spirit astral realm was listed separately, the people of the underworld would probably be listed on the dragon list. This was a great opportunity to become famous, but once you were listed on the dragon list, most of your information would be leaked and your whereabouts would be noticed. Instead, you would be restrained. Moreover, the people of the underworld had multiple identities and could not be investigated. If there were any clues, the consequences would be unimaginable. Speaking of the underworld, Leng Shiqi had already completed 2 of the conditions for the underworld to be upgraded again. Now he only needed to recruit a member of the 10 halls at the level of Yama before the underworld could continue to be upgraded. Now the candidates he was looking for were Wu Diao, Di Chuan, Bing Shang, and Lian Yi. The talents of these 4 people were still slightly inferior to those of the Delta Origi. Wu Diao and Di Chuan were a little older than them. As for Bing Shang and Lian Yi, their cultivation progress was a little slow. Of course, this was relative to the level of the Delta Origi, so Leng Shiqi was still a little uncertain. Putting down the list, Leng Shiqi closed his eyes and went through all the important things to pay attention to in the second round. Finally, he opened his eyes, which were shining brightly. "Come in." He Feichen immediately pushed the door open and entered. "Sir." Leng Shiqi said, "Pass down the order that all the preparations for the second round of the World First Spiritual Cultivator Conference must be arranged properly. It will begin in 3 days." "Yes, sir." Chapter 757. In recent days, the imperial capital had been unusually lively, even more so than Lei Qingjuan's birthday banquet. The number of people who could participate in the second round of the First Spirit Cultivator Conference was actually not many. There were only a little over 1,000 people, but the attention these people brought was simply too high. It could be said that it was unprecedentedly high. In order to witness the First Spirit Cultivator Conference, there were even more people who came to witness it. This was a grand event that the Thunderfire dynasty had never seen in many years. At this time, the imperial capital could be said to be packed. The First Spirit Cultivator Conference was already lively enough, but the Heavenly Dynasty suddenly announced that they were going to set up the Phoenix Dance Roll to include all the peerless beauties in the world. When this news came out, it was like a heavy bomb had been thrown into the water. Who didn't love beauties in the world? If the Phoenix Dance Roll listed all the beauties in the world, even ordinary people would have the chance to see a beauty. That was a great blessing. Moreover, all the beautiful women went crazy. The Phoenix Dance Roll did not compare one's background or cultivation, but only their beauty. There was no lack of other things in this world, but there were countless women who thought that their beauty was unparalleled. When the news of the Phoenix Dance Roll came out, there was a large number of women who wanted to sign up. The scene was even more spectacular than the registration for the First Spirit Cultivator Conference. Because beauties were naturally surrounded by a large number of suitors, and there were even more people who wanted to feast their eyes, there were more men than women who signed up. Everyone thought that the Thunderfire dynasty setting up the Dragon Roll and Phoenix Dance Roll at the same time was already grand enough, but they never thought that another imperial decree would be passed down. The current emperor of the Thunderfire dynasty was going to choose a concubine from the Phoenix Dance Roll. This was simply a great opportunity to reach the heavens in a single step, to become a phoenix from a branch. Not only were there many women who almost fainted from madness, but there were also many disciples of large factions, women from large families, and even many women from top sects who were scrambling like ducks. However, the upper echelons of the various large factions were doing their best to restrain their disciples, because they could all see that this was a trap. The Phoenix Dance rankings had clearly pushed numerous peerless beauties to the heart of the struggle. They could imagine how many young geniuses would fight over the favor of those beauties in the future, and it would also lead to countless conflicts and struggles. As for becoming an imperial concubine, it meant that the faction had sided with the Thunderfire dynasty and would definitely be viewed as an enemy by other sections. In the end, they could only rely on the Thunderfire dynasty. What price did the Thunderfire dynasty pay? He didn't have to pay anything, but instead he got a few beauties and a sect. This was really a good deal. Those who could see through this were all admiring the methods of the Thunderblaze dynasty. However, the women did not care at all. What they wanted was to be the most beautiful woman in the world. They did not care about such things. Thus, these 2 days the imperial capital was unprecedentedly lively. Several grand events were held at the same time, and the lively atmosphere almost ignited the air. On the 3rd day, the atmosphere had reached its peak because the world's first Spirit Cultivator Conference was about to begin. The location of the Spirit Cultivator of each realm was also different. The low-level Spirit Cultivator below the 4 realms of heaven were all in the outer city, and all of them were the most outstanding young disciples of this generation in the various provinces. Most of them were at the 9th layer of the Spirit Transformation realm, and many of them were half a step into the Spirit Pulse realm. There were even some who purposely suppressed their cultivation to prevent themselves from breaking through to the Spirit Pulse realm in order to obtain a spot on the Hidden Dragon ranking and become famous. At this time, there were already 10 huge arenas set up in the outer city's arena. Each arena had a barrier, and there were experts at the Spirit Aperture realm overseeing them to prevent any accidents from happening. Those who were able to reach this stage were all genius disciples. Of course, they could not have their lives in danger. Otherwise, it would be difficult to explain to the Spirit Cultivator sect. There were only about 300 Spirit Cultivators in the 2nd round, so they were divided into 2 matches. The winner would advance, and the loser would leave, until the final 108 people were chosen. After that, there was another round of challenges. These 108 people could challenge each other, and the more victories they had, the higher their ranking would be. At this time, there were already countless people gathered in the outer city to watch the battle. There were also many people nearby who had opened a bet and were opportunistic. The Spirit Aperture Realms arena was in the inner city, and the rules were the same as before. The unity of heaven and man realm did not allow outsiders to watch the battle. It was not because of any other reason, but because the destructive power of the unity of heaven and man realm was very strong. Even if they used formations, they could not guarantee that there would be no accidents. Thus, they decided to let these people fight in a separate space. That place was the minor 5 elements chaos paradise. Previously, after Leng Shiqi had accidentally damaged it, the Thunderblaze dynasty had repaired it. Now, it could be put to good use again, allowing these Unity of Heaven realm experts to display their prowess in battle. Because of this, others could not watch the battle. As for the Sky Origin realm experts' battle method, it was even more special. There were more than 100 Sky Origin realm experts participating in the battle. If they were allowed to fight continuously, the Imperial capital would probably be destroyed by them. Thus, the Sky Origin realm experts all used mental projections to fight. The Thunderblaze dynasty set up a formation, and the 2 sides fighting would enter as mental projections. The formation could create a battle strength similar to the original body, and this method would determine the victor. The most important thing in the Sky Origin realm was the comprehension of the origin energy of heaven and earth. This method could also fully display their abilities, so no one had any objections. At this moment, Leng Shiqi was standing in the minor 5 elements chaos paradise as the disciple of the Wave Island Sword Monarch. Outside the secret realm, there was also a Leng Shiqi monitoring the battle between the Sky Origin realm experts. As for the one outside, it was just a projection of Leng Shiqi. As long as he did not make a move and did not speak carelessly, nothing would happen. Lung Shiqi looked around and saw that the minor five elements chaos paradise was very different from the last time. This time it was not divided into the five elements region. Instead it was divided into 10 huge regions, each of which was gray and hazy. These 10 areas were equivalent to 10 arenas, and each time 10 battles would be held at the same time. There were more than 350 Sky Origin Realm experts around Lung Shiqi. Originally there should be 360 of them, but there were some people who were unable to participate due to special circumstances, such as Tang Haoquang and the others. Lung Shiqi looked around and saw that he was the only one who was in the middle stage of Sky Origin Realm. Other than him, 60% of them were in the late stage of Sky Origin Realm, and 40% were in the peak stage of Sky Origin Realm. This minor five elements chaos paradise was different. Even if they did not make a move, everyone had gathered more or less energy around them, and only he had the least. Thus, Lung Shiqi attracted the attention of many people. At this moment, the Dark Thunder Guard's commander, Heavenly Venerable Black Flame, and the Discipline Commission's commander, Monarch Cloud Shuttle, appeared at the same time. They said straightforwardly, "Since everyone is here, let's begin." Everyone's breathing froze. The world's #1 Spirit Cultivator Conference, which was the focus of everyone's attention, had finally begun. Chapter 758. Monarch Cloud Shuttle flicked his finger, and wisps of clouds spread out, covering the 10 regions. 2 names appeared in each region, and those were the names of the people who were about to fight. Lung Shiqi looked up and saw his name. He muttered, "It's my turn so soon." Then he walked straight to the region in the distance. At the same time, everyone's eyes fell on him. This person is only at the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm? Immediately many people were doubtful. He is indeed at the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. Looking at his young age, it's rare for him to be at this stage. I wonder which county he came from. To be able to come to the imperial capital at the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm, it's either that county has no one, or this person's strength is outstanding and comparable to the late stage. I'm looking forward to it. Hearing the discussion, Chang Fingyu, Huang Xiwan, and the others from Donglin County sneered. They knew best that this Lung Shiqi was only in his 20s. His combat strength was close to the peak of the unity of heaven and man realm. It was far beyond everyone's imagination. However, they did not say anything. They wanted to see the shocked expressions of others just like how they were before. Lung Shiqi's opponent was called Meng Xian. Others might not know the details of others, but Lung Shiqi, as one of the 4 chiefs of the First Spirit Cultivator Conference, naturally knew everything. He instantly recalled all the information about Meng Xian. This person came from the Qinghuan County in the northern part of the Thunderblaze dynasty. He was an elder of a first-rate sect and had a cultivation at the late stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. This was Meng Xian's best saber technique, and he had a 7th-tier saber in his hand. His strength was not ordinary. Lung Shiqi stepped lightly and arrived at the center of the region, waiting with his head held high. Meng Xian was a thin person who looked very capable. He walked over step by step, and a biting cold saber intent soared into the air and locked onto Lung Shiqi. Lung Shiqi smiled brightly, revealing his white teeth. "Junior Lung Shiqi, please enlighten me." Meng Xian did not underestimate his opponent. He was very clear that those who could come to the imperial capital were definitely not weaklings. The fact that this young man in front of him could stand here with the cultivation of the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm meant that he definitely had something outstanding about him. He clenched his fist, and a crescent blade that carried the aura of Muyuan appeared. The blade's aura soared into the sky, and its aura reached the rainbow. On the other hand, Lung Shiqi still took out his level 5 spiritual sword, which looked extremely shabby in front of his opponent's level 7 precious weapon. Meng Xian's face darkened as well, and he said with dissatisfaction, "Aren't you looking down on us too much?" Lung Shiqi shrugged and said, "Senior, please don't misunderstand. I'm very poor and only have this much spiritual energy. Please don't blame me. If that's enough, hurry up and start." Meng Xian was a little impatient. He waved his hand and said, "I'm not bullying you because your cultivation is low. I'll let you make the first move." "Really?" Lung Shiqi raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Of course. Then this junior will respectfully accept." Lung Shiqi cupped his hands and then the blade of his sword trembled. A terrifying sword intent soared into the sky, stirring up the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. In an instant, the void froze, and the sky and earth were enveloped by endless sword intent. The sword intent turned into a huge shadow. The shadow stepped forward with the sword, as if it had merged with heaven and earth. This was the true unity of heaven and man. Leng Shiqi's first move was a sword immortal. As soon as the sword immortal appeared, the space in the entire area trembled slightly, as if even the void was about to shatter. Meng Xian's expression became very stiff. He never dreamed that Leng Shiqi's first move would be such a powerful attack. It was so powerful that he didn't have any confidence in receiving it. The reason why he let Leng Shiqi make the first move was not that he underestimated Leng Shiqi, but that he wanted to see Leng Shiqi's moves first. Who would have thought that he would be in danger before he could see his moves? Meng Xian's saber moved and endless wood energy rose. The saber's momentum cut through the void as if it had the power of 10,000 caddies. However, this saber was nothing in front of the sword immortal. In just one exchange, the sword immortal's shadow directly shattered Meng Xian's saber momentum. The remaining force did not decrease as it pointed its sword at Meng Xian's dantian. At this moment, Meng Xian's expression finally changed drastically. Even though that slash earlier wasn't his trump card, he had fully unleashed the strength of the advanced stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. How could it be as weak as paper? Unfortunately, it was too late for him to counterattack. There were only two things he could do. One was to resist with all his might, and the other was to admit defeat. Meng Xian did not hesitate to shout loudly, "I admit defeat." After he shouted these three words, Leng Shiqi's sword style changed. The sword immortal's shadow suddenly disappeared, and the sword intent that filled the sky also dissipated as if it had never appeared. Meng Xian could not help but feel relieved. Just now he actually felt a trace of threat to his life. However, at the same time his old face turned red. His cultivation was clearly higher than his opponent's, but he had been defeated so quickly. He had lost all his face. Meng Xian looked around and saw that there were indeed a lot of eyes watching him and Leng Shiqi. He coughed awkwardly a few times and left dejectedly. In fact, those people were basically looking at Leng Shiqi. Everyone's eyes were more or less filled with surprise. Leng Shiqi's sword immortal was extremely stunning. Some of the people present were also sword cultivators. They were the most shocked because they could see that Leng Shiqi's attainments in the sword Dao had even exceeded his own realm. This meant that Leng Shiqi's future cultivation path would be smooth sailing without too many bottlenecks. This alone was enough to make many people envious. He defeated Meng Xian in one move. This person's strength is probably stronger than many late-stage unity of heaven and man realm cultivators. Late stage? Even those at the peak of unity of heaven and man realm can't do this. Those who can enter the second round are really capable. This person can't be underestimated. A few sword cultivators in the crowd gathered together. Everyone, you all saw it. Sword heart illuminated, sword intent pure. His sword Dao is very pure. It won't be long before he surpasses me. Which sect is he from? Why haven't I heard of him before? Yes, we have to ask around. At this moment, Heavenly Venerable He Yen said, Leng Shiqi wins. He even looked at Leng Shiqi a few more times. For some reason he felt like he had seen Leng Shiqi somewhere before. Leng Shiqi cupped his hands at Heavenly Venerable He Yen and walked to the corner of the crowd. Although he had used several secret techniques to hide his aura, he was not sure if he could really avoid Heavenly Venerable He Yen's gaze. It was better to ignore Heavenly Venerable He Yen. Leng Shiqi also knew that although he had easily defeated Meng Xian with his current sword Dao strength, there were no weaklings in the following rounds. At most he could hold on for 2 more rounds. If he wanted to make it to the Flying Dragon list with only 36 spots, he had to use other methods. Chapter 759. Leng Shiqi was the first to finish his battle. At this time the other 9 battles had just begun. He quietly watched the battles. There were not many opportunities to watch so many oneness of nature experts fight at the same time. Last time, when he watched the battle between Huang Xiwan and Chang Fengyu, he realized something, so he cherished this opportunity even more. There were more than 300 oneness of nature experts present. There would be more than 170 to 80 battles. This was a good opportunity for Leng Shiqi. In the following period of time, rare experts fought one after another. None of the minor chaos paradise remained calm. Everywhere was filled with violent elemental spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It was not until late at night that these experts finally finished their battles. Lung Shiqi's eyes were faintly blurred. He had watched all the battles. Because there were 10 battles going on at the same time, he could only spread out his spiritual energy to spread out more than half of the 5 elements chaos paradise. However, this also consumed his spiritual energy very quickly. However, he also gained a lot. The battles of the experts gave him a lot of inspiration and enlightenment. He also had a deeper understanding of the control of the elemental spiritual energy. After one round of battles, half of the experts were eliminated. At this moment, there were more than 170 winners. Among them, 80% were at the peak of oneness of nature. It should be known that each of these people was qualified to reach the sky origin stage. They were also absolute leaders in their own sects or forces. Any one of them was a big figure that could shake a region. However, it was very difficult for people of this level to be on the Flying Dragon list. There were only 36 people on the Flying Dragon list. There were nearly 200 people here. Moreover, these people had been in high positions for a long time and were more or less arrogant. It was conceivable that the following battles would only be more intense. At this time, Monarch Cloud Shuttle said, "Today's winners will enter the next round. The battles will start in 2 days. Let's call it a day." Heavenly Venerable Hei Yen formed several hand seals and opened up a huge portal. Everyone immediately left the minor 5 elements chaos paradise. Lung Shiqi was about to sneak back to the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards, but 2 people stopped him. They didn't come over directly, but released a faint killing intent from afar to shroud him. Lung Shiqi glanced at them from the corner of his eyes and found that they were quietly making a few gestures to him. His heart skipped a beat. It was a secret code that only the higher-ups of the Blood Garment Pavilion knew. He recalled that there were indeed 2 experts from the Blood Garment Pavilion participating in this round of battles. They were Green Ghost and 2xin, who were ranked among the 9 great Blood Garment assassins of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Lung Shiqi had specifically looked for these 2 people in the minor 5-element Chaos Grotto Heaven, but there was no one wearing the clothes of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. He also did not find anyone who cultivated the Blood Cloak Pavilion's techniques. However, he vaguely remembered that the 2 people in front of him seemed to have been eliminated. One of them transmitted a message to Lung Shiqi, "Master Lung, I am 2xin, he is Jianghu. Master Lung, you and I have a lot of history." Jianghu laughed. Lung Shiqi also remembered that when he had just left the Blood Fog Island, Delta Origi and the others were all taken in as disciples by the 3 Tianyuan Realm Masters, and he handed them over to the 9 great Blood Garment assassins. At that time, Jianghu had tried to fight for him, but he was rejected by Leng Yu. Later, Leng Yu was rejected by Wuxia. At that time, Lung Shiqi was still a junior disciple in the spirit transformation realm. Now, Jianghu had called him Master Lung. It could be seen that Lung Shiqi's growth was rapid. Of course, he was not arrogant. He secretly transmitted a message, "So it's you 2 senior brothers. This is not the place to talk. Please follow me." After the 3 of them left the minor chaos paradise, they quickly walked into the streets of the imperial capital. Following Lung Shiqi, they quickly arrived at an extremely secluded place. Lung Shiqi waved his hand and laid down a few layers of restrictive spells. At this moment, Green Ghost and 2xion's appearances changed drastically. In an instant, they turned into the Blood Robe Pavilion's assassins, clad in blood-red robes and wearing strange masks. The one with the ferocious green ghost on his mask was Jianghu. He said, "The Blood Garment Pavilion's participation in the World First Spirit Cultivator Conference has already made many forces unhappy. Therefore we did not make a big fuss about it, nor did we use our full strength. Just treat it as a formality." Hearing this, Lung Shiqi nodded. "I see. May I know why you 2 senior brothers have called me here?" "Actually, it's not that we want to find you. There is a master who wants to see you." "That's right. Master? Who is it?" Lung Shiqi was puzzled. To be called a master by Jianghu and 2xion, it was probably only the pavilion master and a few others. But now that the imperial capital was heavily guarded, even a sky origin realm expert would not be able to sneak in. Who could it be? Suddenly a voice sounded. "Good disciple, don't you want to see your master?" Lung Shiqi raised his eyebrows. He already knew who it was. As expected, the space in front of him distorted. A plump man with a small mustache and a small round hat appeared in front of him. This was the wandering cultivator from the Western Wilderness Province, Chu Hejing. He was also the Blood Garment Pavilion's new Sky Origin Realm expert, Wuxia. "Congratulations, Master, for breaking through to the Sky Origin Realm and standing at the peak of the strong." Leng Shiqi immediately congratulated. Wuxiang stroked his mustache. Kid, you flatter me. Although the Sky Origin realm is not weak, there are many people in this world who are stronger than me. What peak of the strong? You're still far from it. I firmly believe that one day, Master, you will reach this level. Tut tut, we haven't seen each other for a long time. Your mouth is getting better and better. Wuxiang smiled and turned his head. You two go first. I have something to say to this kid. Qinggue and 2xn bowed and said, Master Wuxiang, please. We'll take our leave first. Then they turned and left. Wuxiang came over and patted Leng Shiqi's shoulder. Leng Shiqi immediately felt a strange power rushing through his body, but he did not resist. Wuxiang suddenly withdrew his hand and gasped. Kid, your strength is so terrifying. I'm afraid you're not weaker than the peak of the oneness of heaven and man realm. With your current strength, it's easy for you to become one of the 9 underworld blood cloak assassins. How did you cultivate? To be honest, Master, I actually had another opportunity to obtain a mysterious secret realm. That's why my cultivation progressed so fast. Leng Shiqi looked at Wuxiang and had another idea in his mind. That was to pull Wuxiang into the underworld. Wuxiang was originally the bloody kill duo of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Now that he had broken through to the Sky Origin realm, he could definitely obtain the inheritance of the 10 Kings of Hell. Moreover, as Leng Shiqi's master, Wuxiang was indeed somewhat trustworthy. There was no problem in pulling him into the underworld. Secret realm? Wuxiang's eyes lit up. No wonder. You're really lucky. No wonder you're my disciple. Of course. Master, I'll take you to the secret realm to have a look. Can I? Wuxiang was puzzled. In his opinion, the secret realm was not a place that could be entered at will. Leng Shiqi pressed Wuxiang's arm and said, Master, don't resist. He first opened the territory system and summoned Wuxiang into the underworld. Then with a thought, he disappeared with Wuxiang. After the two of them entered the underworld, Leng Shiqi stared in the direction of the Fengdu necropolis. As expected, an enormous amount of netherworld energy soared into the sky and enveloped Wuxiang. Imperial title, Dongyuan Wuxiang Ghost Emperor. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.